It all kicks off in the middle of a frantic war, where the old General Yi Sun-sin is holding his blood-soaked sword with a fierce look in his eyes. One of his soldiers watches the scene, totally on edge. Right behind the commander, a massive battalion waits for orders on the battlefield. Without taking a single step back, the guy screams at the top of his lungs for the troops to keep pushing forward without stopping. All hell breaks loose as the warriors charge the enemy with everything they've got. This whole mess is the famous naval battle in the Noryang Strait, which left the sea ablaze in 1598. Wreckage from ships and a ton of bodies float in the water, which practically glows from the fire. From a distance, the dark night serves as a backdrop for the fleet burning on the horizon. Far from all this madness, the calm of a dark forest stands in stark contrast to the war. A single owl is just chilling, perched on the branch of a dead tree. But soon, the bird takes flight and vanishes into the darkness. Shattering the dead of night silence, two guys are riding like madmen across the fields. They're racing against the clock with a look on their faces that says they're delivering some seriously bad news. Arriving in the Manhwa region, the duo finally reaches a camp lit by torches. Hearing the clatter of horses, a guard opens the tent flap to see who just rolled in like that. Inside the tent, a doctor is trying desperately to remove a musket ball from a really nasty wound. The patient is the general himself, lying face down with his back completely bandaged up. Just outside, the guy's brother and nephew show up, desperate to know how he's doing. His eldest son, Yi-ho, explains that the doctor is in there, but his father is in grave danger of not making it through the night. Hearing this, his nephew Yi-wan is overcome with anguish over the situation. He complains that the wound should have been treated on the spot, but Ho reminds him that the general forbade anyone from spreading the news that he'd been shot. Still not having it, the nephew grumbles about how stubborn his uncle is and how he doesn't care about his own life. At that exact moment, the tent flap moves, and the doctor finally steps out. The two relatives immediately rush over, extremely anxious for any update. The doctor lets out a heavy sigh, lowers his head, and announces that it's all over. Already expecting the worst-case scenario, one asks with a shaky voice if his uncle really passed. The doctor gives a slightly awkward cough, realizing the mix-up. Then he clarifies that, no, the commander didn't kick the bucket, he just regained consciousness. Totally in shock, the men can't believe this crazy turn of events. Immediately, the pair bursts into the tent, calling for the general with a sense of relief that's almost overwhelming. Despite taking a fatal shot, Yi Sun-sin managed to cheat fate and come back to life. That miracle marked the exact end of the war that had dragged on for 7 long years. Far away, in the temporary palace of Hanyang, the mood is anything but festive. King Shanzhou is looking over some war scrolls with a very sore expression. A minister reports that the commander defeated 500 enemy ships and barely escaped with his life. Annoyed by the news, the monarch mutters under his breath, wondering why fate didn't just take the guy for good. The advisor only half hears him and asks what the king just said. Playing it cool, Xianzhou quickly makes something up, saying he was just commenting on what a huge loss the general's passing would be for the country. The minister, completely clueless, agrees, praising how the commander saved the nation from the enemy's fury. He even adds that the people are worshipping the warrior in the streets, saying he's better than legendary heroes. Getting carried away, the guy suggests the king reward the general and promote him to honor his achievement. Suddenly losing his cool, the king flips out, screaming and asking if the advisor thinks he's some kind of idiot. Shaking with fear, the minister bows low and tries to explain that even their allies recommended this reward. But the king brutally cuts him off, telling him to shut up and get out. Not understanding a single thing, the advisor just freezes on the spot. With a psycho look in his eyes, Xianzhou repeats the order for him to get the heck out of the room immediately. With nothing else to do, the servant lowers his head and quietly slips out, scared to bits. Once outside, he's sweating bullets, thinking he got himself into trouble for praising someone the king hates. Slapping his own mouth, the poor guy complains about how his big mouth always gets him into scrapes. As he walks through the courtyard, he prays mentally that he won't get fired over this blunder. On a mountain not too far away, a smoke signal rises, signaling that something has gone wrong. Just then, another advisor appears, running like a madman through the courtyard, screaming at the top of his lungs. The monarch gets ticked off by the lack of manners and asks who let the guy barge into the hall like that. Out of breath, the man ignores the scolding and drops the bombshell that a rebellion is underway. Surprised by the news, the king even stops eating his little piece of fruit, his jaw on the floor. The messenger lays it all out, saying that Yi Sun-sin's troops are marching straight for the palace. Shaking with rage, the sovereign crumples his own clothes and says he knew this day would come. Terrified, the advisor begs the king to get out of there to save his own life. Before anyone can make a move, the hall doors are kicked open with incredible force. Looking back, the servant stammers, pale as a ghost, as he recognizes the intimidating figure of the commander. With an insane amount of presence, the general enters the hall, one step at a time. He completely ignores the guards and slowly walks toward the throne. Trying to pretend everything's fine, a nervous Xianzhou says he was just about to send for the hero to give him some awards. Ignoring the small talk, the old man asks with a deadly gaze if the king has been well. With zero patience, he makes it clear that he himself hasn't felt that same well-being for a long time. Right after, he gets real, saying that given his age, the king should treat him like an older brother. Staring the monarch down, Yi Sunsen throws it in his face that he's a coward who abandoned his people to perish at the hands of their enemies. Completely unhinged, the king cracks a crooked smile and says he needs to stay on the throne to repay this debt to the nation. Filled with fury, the commander draws his sword, disgusted by the guy's audacity to call himself king after everything. Cornered, Xianzhou cries like a child and begs for his life, promising to do whatever the general commands. But the old man coldly informs him that the heavens and the people have already given up on his useless government. Without a second thought, he brings the sword down with all his might to end the king and take the throne of Joseon. Suddenly, the king wakes up with a jolt, grabbing his own neck in total desperation. He's in his own room, sweating buckets, and realizing the rebellion was just a horrifying nightmare. A guard hears the shouting and asks what happened, leaving the king too confused to explain what he just dreamed. The king wakes up in a cold sweat in the palace, and tells the guard to forget about it. Sitting on the edge of his bed, he complains that he's lost count of how many nightmares he's been having. Distraught, the monarch blames the general for coming back from the war alive just to torment him. He clutches his clothes, feeling an immense pressure just from breathing the same air as the warrior. With a crazed look, Xianzhou declares that the man's very existence is an act of treason and orders him to be summoned without fail. A month passes, and the city of Hanyang wakes up bustling and peaceful. Walking through the streets, two ministers notice how much the capital has changed lately. One of them happily comments that peace has finally returned after 7 long years of bloody war. But his colleague disagrees with the hero worship, saying all the credit goes to the people who held on through the darkness. Amidst the lively market, they agree that the nation is set to prosper with people like these. Soon after, Yi Sunsen's entourage arrives on horseback at the gates of the royal palace. An official greets the hero with a cynical smile, informing him that the king is already waiting in the hall. With that, the commander orders his own troops to wait outside while he pays his respects. The general then walks alone toward the main entrance of the immense castle. Worried about their leader, the soldiers get tense, finding this sudden summons very strange. The day continues sunny outside the grand palace walls. Accompanied by the servant, the hero walks silently through the long corridors of the palace. He observes the main hall fully lit, but doesn't see a single soul inside. The guide says he'll announce his arrival to the king and asks him to wait right there. As soon as the official leaves, the door closes, leaving the commander completely alone in the room. With the place totally empty, the general finds the lack of royal guards protecting the area odd. But he doesn't pay it much mind, thinking he just needs to report to the king and leave. Suddenly, the doors fly open with a man screaming at the top of his lungs, calling him a traitor. Surprised by the insult, the warrior turns around and comes face to face with the royal investigator and his guards. Not understanding what's going on, he questions the reason for such an absurd accusation. The minister points a finger in the hero's face, bluntly accusing him of planning a rebellion against the crown. Furious, the suit and tie wearing official bellows at the soldiers to arrest the criminal immediately. At his command, the troops advance, drawing their swords and surrounding the general from all sides to prevent any escape. Ignoring the blade at his neck, the commander demands to speak directly with the king to clear things up. However, the investigator scoffs, telling him he'll see the monarch soon enough and to just cooperate for now. With no way to resist the encirclement, the general is escorted out under heavy armed guard. Night falls heavily with a full moon shining alone in the pitch black sky. The next morning, the sun illuminates the palace roof tiles, bringing another turbulent day. Far from royalty, 2 guards are on patrol at the wooden door of a very isolated prison. One of the guards gossips that the prisoner captured last night is definitely not some commoner. His partner warns him that the investigator has forbidden anyone from peeking inside under penalty of demise. Despite the strict warning, the curious guard presses his face against the wood to get a little peek through a crack. Inside the filthy cell, Yi Sunsen is slumped on the floor, contemplating his own misfortune. Utterly depressed, he reflects that he should have perished back in the battle to avoid this nightmare. The warrior doesn't care about his own end, but his heart aches for the danger his family is in. At that moment, a voice comes out of nowhere, commenting on the worn-out appearance of someone who hasn't slept. The general looks up and recognizes the inner prince Yun Dushu standing there in front of the bars. Filled with anger, the hero questions if that scoundrel was the one who poisoned the king's mind with lies. Mocking the situation, the politician ironically notes the danger of making such a serious accusation out loud. He tells the prisoner to get a grip on reality, reminding him that his life is now hanging by a very thin thread. With a sadistic tone, the prince details the huge number of the general's relatives who are gonna go down with him. Losing his mind, Yi Sun-sun screams that he will curse the man until his last breath if they touch a single hair on his family's head. Ever the cold one, the minister informs him that he appeared precisely to prevent that massacre. The commander is taken aback and speechless upon hearing the unusual proposal from his greatest enemy. Backing his prey into a corner, the man in charge suggests the prisoner make a decision quickly before it's too late. With the excuse of having work to do, the politician turns to leave, letting him think it over in the dark. Desperate, the hero tries to guarantee his family's safety in exchange for confessing to the false treason. Without blinking, the prince gives his word, assuring him that no one will lose their head if the deal goes through. Exhausted from fighting the system, the general closes his eyes, accepting his own imminent defeat. Giving into the dirty blackmail, he agrees to confess to the rebellion as long as the promise is kept at all costs. The official praises his wise choice and promises to ask the king for a painless execution so the warrior won't suffer. Resigned, the prisoner mutters to himself that he's lived long enough and has nothing more to complain about. Satisfied with his victory, the prince calmly walks through the prison's lit courtyard. Outside, the royal investigator meets his boss and asks if the conversation finally bore fruit. The minister delivers the good news about the confession, leaving his ally thrilled with how easily the plan worked. Curious about the success, the investigator immediately asks what the next orders are. With pure malice in his eyes, the prince orders the hero's sons to be exiled and all the women to be enslaved. Without questioning the cruelty, the subordinate accepts the order with a wide grin. Immediately, he runs off with the troops to destroy the lives of all the general's family members. Alone in the courtyard, the politician laughs to himself, thinking it would be crazy to spare the man's family. He considers it foolish to leave relatives alive only for them to plot revenge against the crown in the future. A short time later, the main palace courtyard is fully prepared for the final event. Right in the center of it all, Yi Sun-sun waits, kneeling with a small table and a bowl in front of him. From his makeshift throne, King Xianzhou watches the entire scene with a very relaxed posture. An official reads the final sentence aloud, declaring the irreversible end of the line for the traitor. Because of the trumped-up crimes, the decree orders the hero to drink the fatal poison as his final punishment. Trying to play the part of a merciful good guy, the king asks if the condemned has anything to say before his final moments. Without showing any emotion or fear, the general just stares into the void in absolute silence. Impatient with the man's muteness, the monarch tells him to just drink the poison already if he has nothing to say. To make his phoniness even worse, Xianzhou claims he has already guaranteed the safety of the entire family so the warrior can go in peace. Believing the king's lie, the general thanks him for his false kindness. With that, he firmly grips the bowl of poison and prepares to accept his own end. From the throne, the monarch watches everything with a look of someone who finds the situation amusing. Beside him, Prince Yun Duzu also watches the execution in absolute silence. Suddenly, a man bursts into the courtyard, screaming desperately for the commander not to drink it under any circumstances. The hero recognizes the voice instantly and realizes it's Kim, his household servant. Crying heavily, the servant reveals that the sons have already been exiled and the women dragged away as slaves. In shock from the disgusting betrayal, the warrior drops the bowl from his hand. At that, the monarch stammers in fear, wanting to know how that guy managed to get past security. The guards throw the intruder to the ground without mercy, but the poor guy keeps screaming that his master would never stage a mutiny. Furious with the interruption, the king points at Prince Dusu, trying to come up with an excuse for the tragedy. But the commander's look of pure hatred freezes the atmosphere in the hall instantly. With no way out, Sanjo blames the law, saying that the price of rebellion always falls on the children as well. Shaking with rage, the warrior yells that he gave his life to drive out the enemies and protect the crown. The prince quickly counters the hero's fury, throwing it in his face that he himself had confessed to the crime just moments ago. At that, the general lays out the truth: he only took the false blame to protect his family from their end. Completely losing control, Xianzhou tells him to shut up and chug the poison already. But the warrior smashes the table with his hands and declares that he will no longer obey orders from a coward. Utterly terrified, the monarch backs away, realizing things just got seriously real. An executioner steps forward, calling the general trash and raising his sword for a cowardly attack. In a swift move, the hero disarms the guard and takes the weapon for himself. The impact sends the soldier flying, complaining that his back is toast. Gripping the sword's hilt firmly, the commander prepares to deliver justice with his own hands. Facing everyone as an equal, he shows not a shred of fear. The prince watches the scene, offended, cursing the man as a parasite for threatening royalty. Ignoring the insult, the general points the blade directly at the king, blaming his incompetence for all this misery. Sweating bullets in desperation, Xianzhou begs the soldiers to stop the madman immediately. Seizing the opportunity, a guard charges forward, screaming with a trident in hand, ready for the takedown. Without any difficulty, the hero dodges the blow and cuts down his opponent in a single instant. Walking calmly, he states that he doesn't care about his own end, but he swears revenge for them touching his family. Enraged, the commander says the king can't tell loyal men from venomous snakes, and is the true traitor to the nation. At that exact moment, several arrows rip through the air and lodge directly in the warrior's back. The brutal impact makes the sword slip from his hand before he can take another step. Completely pierced by the royal archers, he loses his strength and can no longer stay on his feet. The hero's body collapses heavily to its knees as blood stains the entire courtyard. With one last pained breath, the great general finally falls, closing his eyes forever. Suddenly, a young Yi Sun-sin wakes up with a start, letting out a muffled scream in the darkness. Sweating profusely, the young man sits up in bed, trying to make sense of that horrifying madness. He takes a deep breath, trying to convince himself that his own demise was nothing more than a simple nightmare. The morning light is already streaming in through the cracks of his wooden bedroom door. Outside, a servant is casually sweeping the yard and jokes that the young master overslept. Still in a daze, the young man leaves his room looking like he didn't get a wink of sleep. The scene outside is super peaceful, with cherry blossom petals floating on the calm breeze. All of this takes place in the province of Assen, in the peaceful year of 1563. Sitting on his front step, the young man reflects that this nightmare has been repeating in his head over and over. The big problem for him is that everything he dreams ends up happening for real, sooner or later. Confused by this curse, he even starts to doubt whether he's living inside an illusion. Holding his head, the young man complains about how these visions always throw his life into total chaos. Just then, he vaguely remembers having another bizarre dream last night, this one focused on someone else. Agonized by the memory, he panics, thinking another disaster is about to happen in real life. Coming closer to cheer him up, the servant says it's very important to dream big in your youth. With a wide smile, the old man says he believes in the master's potential to do great things for the country. But the young man couldn't care less about the motivational speech and suddenly runs off in a hurry. Very seriously, he decides he needs to confirm with his own eyes if the dream's tragedy is real. In the middle of the dark night, the young man walks silently across the rooftops of the village houses. The memory of the nightmare showed a person sleeping peacefully in a dark, isolated room. Stopping in front of a residence, he confirms that the place is exactly the same as the one he'd been looking for during the day. There in the yard, two thugs armed with wooden clubs are talking, hidden in the shadows. The leader of the thugs says cynically that he never goes easy when the target is abducting a woman. Hidden behind the wall, the young man sighs in frustration upon discovering that the nightmare was right again. Hearing a strange noise, the leader of the criminals turns around, wanting to know who's snooping around. Without any ceremony, the young master steps out of the shadows and calmly faces the two thugs. The thug's sidekick tries to guess if the newcomer also came to snatch the ladies that night. Sensing the tension, the leader gets suspicious of such a young boy's cocky attitude. Mockingly, the criminal asks if the kid was also drawn in by the sweet scent of their target. The young man mentally confirms that he hit the nail on the head by guessing these guys were the worst thieves in the region. Trying to act tough, the thug tells the kid to get lost because the duo got to the score first. With a confident look, the young man states that he didn't walk all this way in the dark, just to leave empty-handed. Feeling the direct challenge, the thug loses his patience with the boy's audacity to defy both of them. Thinking he can settle it with his fists, the criminal lunges at the young man, his club raised to strike. Without losing focus, the young man dodges the attack and immediately sends a vicious leg sweep at his opponent. With the perfect blow, the henchman goes flying and lands face first on the ground, making a loud thud on the wood. Lying in the dust, the thug groans in pain, complaining that the kid got way too rough on defense. Seeing his partner get an easy beatdown, the leader tightens his grip on his own club, seething with rage. Without a second thought, the older thug charges forward, announcing that the fun and games are over. Focused, the young master calmly observes his enemy's movements. The thug prepares to attack, and the young man quickly recognizes the stance as a Japanese technique. With this, he concludes that the rumors about disguised Japanese spies in the villages were completely true. Without wasting time, the fake monk charges, shouting the name of his own move. The criminal brings his weapon down with all his might, intending to slice the boy in half. However, the thug is shocked to realize the kid dodged the attack as if it were nothing. Completely crouched and unharmed, our hero prepares for the counter-attack. In a swift motion, he pulls out the small dagger hidden in his clothes. Seeing the blade up close, the thug panics completely, with no way to retreat. The young man says that hiding a weapon up your sleeve is a good trick, but his blade is still faster. Immediately, he delivers a precise upward slash toward the enemy's body. The violent strike tears through his opponent in the blink of an eye. With the threat handled, the young man sheathes his dagger with the utmost coolness. He then turns and grabs the defeated partner by the collar, warning him that it's his turn now. Lying on the ground, the henchman just groans in pain, spitting blood, unable to react. Then our hero attacks with full force, telling the guy to blame his nightmare for this beatdown. The impact is so strong that the thug spits up a lot of blood and loses his strength on the spot. Finishing the job, the boy stands up, wiping his hands and looking at the two bodies on the ground. He lets out a long sigh of relief for having solved this problem so quickly. But suddenly, a memory hits him hard and he tenses up again. The young man recalls that in the dream, there was still one more thug involved in the scheme. Without a second thought, he runs straight for the main house to prevent the worst. In an isolated part of the mansion, darkness engulfs one of the wooden rooms. Inside, a big bald man watches the sleeping woman and maliciously compliments her beauty. However, a strange noise catches the intruder's attention, and he turns toward the door. Annoyed, he grumbles that he told his partner to keep watch, and that he hadn't even started the job yet. As soon as he opens the door to peek, he gets a huge shock from what he finds. Stuttering in fear, the bald guy asks who the heck the person standing there is. Very calmly, the young man asks for silence and says it's better if they settle this outside without making any noise. Sensing the danger, the big guy shuts up instantly, swallowing hard. Out in the house's yard, our hero walks calmly, followed by the giant enemy. The big guy follows his steps, annoyed, thinking about how his useless henchman ruined the whole plan. But his anger soon turns into absolute shock as he looks at the ground. From a distance, he finally sees his own partners completely sprawled out on the dirt. One of the lookouts is knocked out in the dust with a nasty, bleeding cut. Not believing the scene, the bald guy asks if it was really this kid who did all this damage. Ignoring the question, the young man says that the mere fact they stepped on this land is unforgivable. He throws it in their faces that trying to abuse people takes away any right for that scum to keep living. Utterly offended, the thug curses the boy, promising to slice him up for fish food. Right after, the criminal leader firmly grips the hilt of his own weapon. Drawing a massive sword, he proudly announces that he's on a whole different level than the other thugs. The bald guy charges like an enraged bull, yelling that he's about to show him the difference in strength firsthand. The weapons clash brutally in the middle of the courtyard, sending sparks flying into the dark night. Even with a small blade, the young man holds back the heavy attack with great firmness. Analyzing the disadvantage, he notices that his opponent's sword has a huge reach. With brutal blows, the bald guy warns that the boy has entered the perfect distance to meet his end. The young man has to back up quickly to avoid being hit squarely by the swift cut. Laughing at his struggle, the criminal mocks that he almost took the boy's arm off. He quickly raises his sword again, promising he won't make the same mistake twice. Feeling the pressure, our hero recognizes that if he underestimates the guy's strength, he's going to lose his head right there. The two warriors stand still in the yard, calculating their next move from a distance. Confident in his own reach, the thug keeps his guard up, waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, the young man holds his dagger defensively, completely focused on the battle. Mentally, the young man deduces that fighters of the same level trade several blows until someone wins. But since the weapon disadvantage is huge, any tiny slip up will cost him his life. So he understands that he needs a single, perfect opening to end the fight. But he also knows that just staying on the defensive won't create that opportunity out of thin air. Taking advantage of the sword's size, the big guy attacks relentlessly, forcing the boy to retreat. Very arrogantly, the villain tells the kid to stop hiding and come fight for real. He even asks if the boy is frustrated that he can't get close with that useless little weapon. Out of patience, our hero admits to himself that the enemy is completely right about the distance. Seeing the trap, the young man decides there's only one risky way to win this fight. In an explosive burst, he charges forward, calculating that he needs to get right up on his opponent to have a chance. Seeing the suicidal advance, the big guy recognizes the obvious attempt to force an opening. Quick on the uptake, the villain takes a step back, laughing at the boy's naivety. The bald guy concludes that he just needs to backpedal at the same speed to keep his reach advantage intact. But the young master surprises him, revealing that he had calculated the guy's escape route a long time ago. Bothered by the kid's confidence, the criminal complains that this talk makes no sense at all. Suddenly, the big guy's back hits a firm, unexpected obstacle. Looking to the side, he panics, discovering he backed right into the stone wall. Seizing the mistake, the young man leaps with his blade ready and declares that a true master never ignores the environment. A quick and fatal slash cuts through the air, straight at the target trapped against the wall. With thug leader drops his weapon and spits blood, feeling the serious wound. The thug falls to his knees, still stammering that he's gonna get that rotten kid. Ignoring the useless threat, our hero stands with his back to him, flicking his dagger to clean the blood from the fight. Cleaning the blade, the young man recalls the nightmare where Japanese spies invaded the scholar Choi's house. In the horrifying dream, poor Kumai couldn't bear the shame of the assault and took her own life in the middle of the night. But now, watching the girl sleeping so peacefully, he feels an enormous sense of relief. The young man firmly concludes that he managed to change that tragic fate for good. The morning sun shines calmly over the residence's courtyard, erasing the horrors of the night. Sitting in his own room, our hero understands that these visions of the future are actually a divine mission. He knows the enemies are getting worse every day, attacking people in broad daylight and committing brutal atrocities. Unable to accept the unjust ends, the boy decides he must be the barrier to stop this massacre. Suddenly, the old servant appears, asking what he's writing so intently, but the young man plays it off, claiming it's just a diary. With that, the servant backs the master into a corner, demanding to know where he was last night because his mother showed up looking for him. The young man panics instantly, just at the thought of almost getting caught red-handed by his family. The old man calms the situation down, telling him he made up a flimsy excuse about him going to borrow a book. Even with the readied lie, the servant keeps pressing to know the real reason for that mysterious outing. Quickly, our hero invents that he went to meet Jimin, a cousin on his mother's side. Satisfied with the answer, the servant mentions the rumor that 2 Japanese thugs were found done for by the scholar Choi's wall this morning. Trying not to give himself away, the young master feigns surprise and pretends he didn't know anything. The old man is overjoyed, stating that the news takes a huge weight off his shoulders and that he'll finally be able to sleep. Excited, the servant swears he would have beaten up any intruder, making the boy feel awkward, but he agrees to play along. Before dropping the subject, the older man asks the master to give him a heads up next time he decides to play fugitive for the night. With the excuse of having a lot of chores piled up, the servant says goodbye and turns his back. The young man just watches the man leave through the courtyard while processing the crazy situation he's living in. Later, while walking through the village, the young man is stopped by the servant asking if he's heard the news yet. The afternoon paints the sky orange as a commotion brews near a local tavern. On the dirt road, a woman is arguing furiously with a freeloader who's trying to leave without paying his bar tab. The deadbeat tries to string the owner along, promising to settle the whole debt in 3 or 4 days. The hardworking woman isn't buying the excuse and demands at least the money for the day, reminding him how tough the work is there. With zero patience, the guy shoves the vendor brutally, telling her to stop whining in his ear. Acting all tough, he spits on the ground, cursing his own luck for having to put up with this kind of annoying collection. The freeloader's tough guy act ends quickly when he trips hard over a foot that appears out of nowhere in his path. The thug falls face first into the dust and jumps up, seething with anger, wanting to know which idiot tripped him. Standing there with his arms crossed, the young Jimin scoffs that the guy has money to gamble, but not to pay for his drinks. The debtor's eyes go wide instantly, totally intimidated upon recognizing the boy in front of him. Just then, a much larger partner of the deadbeat approaches, wanting to know what the commotion is about. Unfazed by his opponent's size, the boy tells the newcomer to pay the bill immediately. In a threatening tone, Jimin demands that the big guy hand over the cash and settle his buddy's entire debt right away. The scene from afar, a resident finds the kid's aggressive stance strange and wonders what's gotten into him today. Pressured, the leader of the thugs eventually gives in and throws several coins on the ground to end the matter. The guy says the bill is paid and calls his partner to get out of there as fast as possible. Watching the duo retreat, the young vigilant maintains his imposing posture while the crowd around them is left confused. Suddenly, the bigger thug notices a detail that puts him on high alert. Without letting his guard down, Jimin maintains a cold stare, following every step of the guys as they leave. Quite tense, the big guy picks up the pace, calling his colleague, wanting to disappear from that street as soon as possible. Messing with them, the young man waves his hand, telling the deadbeat to take care. From a distance, the debtor asks indignantly if his partner really backed down to a punk, earning a harsh scolding to shut his mouth. The sidekick finally understands his friend's nervousness when he finds out the kid is actually the son of Inspector Bayan. The thug grumbles that the kid's father's position isn't that high, But the big guy explains that his boldness comes from being the son of a concubine. The older one advises against causing trouble, as rumors are flying that the inspector has strong connections in the city. Far away, the vendor thanks him for his help and invites the young Jimin for dinner if he has nowhere to go. Trying to maintain his tough guy facade, he refuses the offer, stating that he can take care of himself and tells her to look after her own mother. The young man turns his back and walks down the dirt road with a closed-off posture, as if carrying the weight of the world. Just then, the boy's attention is drawn by a strange commotion on the village street. A child comes running at full speed toward him, shouting the young man's name at the top of his lungs. Curious, Jimin asks what all the shouting is about, while the kid tries to catch his breath. Taking advantage of the privacy, the little one pulls the young man close and whispers a bombshell of a secret in his ear. Totally in shock, the young man asks if the information is real, and the boy swears on his life that he witnessed everything. Intrigued by the gossip, Jimin wonders why that guy would suddenly start training in martial arts. Meanwhile, calm reigns in a dense bamboo forest bathed in sunlight. Training in isolation, the young Yi Sun-sun strikes the air with a wooden sword, reflecting that words alone don't solve problems. With swift movements, he remembers the people's suffering and concludes that brute force is essential to protect everyone. Our hero executes a precise cut in the air, convinced that focusing on his own strength is the only way out. He brings the blade down angrily, yelling that he needs to prove his worth and show he's not like the criminals. Completely sweaty, the warrior pushes himself to evolve so that tragedies don't repeat themselves. A short time later, the young man pulls his own horse by the reins, slowly returning down the mountain path. Suddenly, the young man's attention is stolen by someone approaching on the path. He focuses his gaze and notices a man walking toward him on the dirt road. The man bows with great respect and immediately offers a very formal greeting to the master. The messenger informs him that he was sent at the request of Lady Yanhua with the sole purpose of delivering a letter. The boy takes the paper at once and analyzes the message with great concentration. In the note, the young woman reveals that she needs to talk about a serious matter and asks him to meet her as soon as possible. The servant reinforces the message, assuring him that his mistress is already waiting near the hill, and the young man agrees to show up. The sunset colors the scenery as the young woman waits alone under a gigantic tree. Our hero approaches from behind the young woman, who soon notices his arrival by the sound of his footsteps on the grass. The girl greets her friend very sweetly and thanks him for his quick presence that late afternoon. Finding the urgency strange, the young man comments that they usually plan their meetings beforehand and wants to know what prompted this. In a downcast tone, she reveals that things have taken a terrible turn, leaving the young man completely confused by the news. Yanhua sadly confesses that her father will never allow their relationship. She says there's no way to convince the old man and asks him to understand her pain. The young woman explains that going against her parents' wishes would take all the meaning out of their union. Understanding the difficult situation, Yi Sun-sun agrees at once. Quite upset, the young man concludes that fate simply doesn't want the two of them together in this life. With that, he confesses that he will miss the girl very much. Indignant at his passivity, Yanhua loses her patience and asks why he always has to be so resigned to everything. Completely furious, the girl demands to know how he can talk about separation with such a blank face, showing no apparent emotion. Keeping his cool in the face of her outburst, our hero asks very directly if there's any other viable way out of their situation. Taking a deep breath, she explains that her father doesn't hate the young man, but the big problem is his daughter joining the Yi family. The young woman then suggests that he go live at her house, following an old local custom. Confused, the young man questions if that would really solve everything. Understanding the crazy proposal, Yi Sun-sun's eyes widen, and he asks if she really wants him to become a live-in son-in-law in her family. Noticing his shock, Yanhua decides to give her beloved some time to think about it. She just asks that the warrior not take too long to give a final answer. Still a bit dazed by the absurd idea, he agrees and promises to consider the proposal carefully before making a final decision. The sun is already beginning to set on the horizon as the young man walks away, leading his horse on foot. Yanhua remains on the hill, silently watching his departure. Not wanting to ruin the moment, the girl's young servant politely informs her that they need to head back home before it gets completely dark. Walking alone, the warrior reflects on how complicated this proposal is. He concludes that any choice he makes will end up hurting someone important. In the midst of this internal conflict, the young man's silent walk is suddenly interrupted by someone shouting his name from behind. Our hero turns to look and quickly recognizes the young Jimin running hastily down the dirt road to catch up with him. Out of breath, the kid complains that he looked for his friend everywhere in the training area and couldn't find him. The older one says he had already finished and was leaving. Noticing the route, Jimin finds the path strange and questions why the guy is going this way since his house is in the opposite direction. To throw him off, Yi Sun-sin just says he met someone along the way. With that, the boy understands why he wasted so much time looking for nothing. Changing the subject completely, the younger one asks expectantly if the warrior saw the notice at the office last night. Not understanding a single thing, the young man is surprised and asks back, wanting to know what kind of notice it could be. The boy's memory focuses on the courtyard of the royal office, where a large crowd had formed to gossip about the local government's news. The atmosphere in the place was one of pure excitement, with people chattering nonstop about the implementation of the long-awaited first military exam. In the middle of the confusion, an illiterate resident asks for help understanding the paper. An official clarifies that it's the official announcement for the army entrance test. The document posted on the wall contained all the important details, confirming that the selection would take place on the 20th day of the 8th month. Back in the present, Jimin bets that it was precisely because of this test that the warrior started training. Yi Sun-sin just stays silent, processing everything. Back on his horse, riding through the forest trails, our hero gets lost in thought, questioning if he was really reborn in this peaceful era. With his mind racing, he wonders if these visions of the old general dying riddled with arrows are actually mysterious spiritual premonitions. Gripping the reins firmly, the warrior admits that it's very difficult to believe in any of these crazy options while riding at full speed. The sound of hooves echoes loudly across the open plain, marking the young man's haste to discover what cruel fate has in store for him. Our hero focuses entirely on his own improvement and fires a perfect arrow while riding his horse at full gallop. Leaving no room for error, the arrowhead sticks squarely in the middle of the wooden target set up in the training field. Tired of living in doubt, the warrior narrates that he decided to check out a future event firsthand to confirm the truth once and for all. The entrance to the immense fortress is already packed with anxious candidates preparing for the great challenge ahead. Gathering various warriors from all over the region, that historic event was exactly the dreaded military exam that would seal the country's fate. Infiltrated among so many aspiring soldiers, Yi Sun-sin awaits orders with an extremely focused look in the courtyard. He remembers that in his nightmare, he suffered a nasty fall from his horse right in the first stage of the test, resulting in a shameful failure in front of everyone. The tense atmosphere takes over the immense field as the great war drums are beaten to announce the start of the activities. From the top of the platform, the region's military commander takes the floor and informs everyone that this year's ordeal will be divided into 6 rigorous categories. Maintaining an authoritative pose, the veteran lists that the tests will range from shooting with wooden and iron arrows to mounted combat and archery on the move. The leader warns that any slip-up in scoring results in immediate elimination and tells the troops to face the test like a real battlefield. To wrap up his short speech, he states that the army needs efficient people and officially declares the opening of that year's military exams. A brutal and deafening beat on the drum echoes through the entire courtyard, officially kicking off the brutal competition for real. The first phase challenges the candidate's precision using wooden arrows on a distant target, requiring maximum concentration to secure a good score. Positioned on the wooden platform, the first archers ready their bows as soon as the inspector shouts for everyone to knock their weapons. In perfect sync, the first group draws their bowstrings, aiming at the horizon with the focus of someone betting their life on it. At the command to fire, a shower of arrows cuts through the air, flying straight for the target scattered across the open field. One of the shots travels the perfect distance and hits the canvas with full force, shaking the structure on impact. Validating the impeccable hit, an evaluator on the field waves the red flag vibrantly, announcing that the candidate scored 7 points in this stage. With no time to rest, the inspector demands the second and third shots in succession, keeping the pace frantic and demanding agility from the front line. The pressure starts to weigh on some, and one of the archers fumbles badly when releasing the string, his entire equipment shaking. As a result of the silly mistake, his arrow loses power halfway and sticks right in the grass, long before reaching the mark. Utterly desperate over his failure, the candidate laments his bad luck, while the officials are already yelling out his summary elimination without any pity. To make the poor guy's shame even worse, the other waiting warriors burst out laughing, openly mocking his public failure. Ignoring the eliminated candidate's humiliation, the main evaluator already calls up the next in line to take the exact firing position on the platform. With firm steps and an extremely imposing posture, a very confident warrior stands up under our hero's watchful and analytical gaze. The burly man walks, exuding extreme confidence, passing right by all the tension of the other contestants scattered on the grass. Sporting a smirk and tying a headband, the veteran makes it clear to the audience that he's not there to play games. Alongside his fellow evaluators, the brute assumes the perfect stance as soon as he hears the loud command to prepare the first attack. With impressive arm strength, he releases the string, firing a heavy shot that rips through the wind with sheer brutality. The big guy's arrow shoots off at an absurd speed, piercing the sky of the training field as if it were a real lethal shot. The violent projectile travels the entire long distance without losing stability and shatters the fabric target with a sharp impact. Impressed by the sheer force of the blow, the official on the field waves the red cloth, validating the excellent shot. Sitting on the grass, the contestants gossip, shocked by the guy's aim, commenting that the arrow flew far beyond the 240 pace mark. Excited by the show, the guys conclude that this master shot will secure precious extra points for the brute in the overall ranking. Watching all the euphoria in silence, Sunsen assesses the powerful competitor from a distance, realizing the competition in this trial is high risk. Without losing his cocky pose, the veteran repeats his flawless stance and unleashes the second shot with the exact same monstrous aggression as before. Once again, the merciless arrow shot crosses the open field with absolute perfection and punishes the wooden target set up in the back. Completely dominating the space, the warrior finishes his movement holding the bow as steady as a rock, proving his absurd body control. The rookie audience showers him with praise, amazed by his aggressive talent, suspecting that someone with such insane skills could only be an experienced ex-soldier. One of the gossipers reveals that he snooped at the list and found out the monster's name is Joju Guan, but he can't confirm the rumors of a military past. All hyped up, the guy next to him bets money on the spot that candidate number 307 will take first place by a ridiculous margin. Cutting the kid's excitement short, a much older man declares that he's betting all his chips on the certain elimination of candidate 307. Caught completely off guard by the contrary opinion thrown out of nowhere, the younger guy's eyes widen, wanting to understand the old man's thinking. Analyzing the scene coldly, the wise man points out that the big guy's sloppy posture breaks all required etiquette, showing unacceptable habits for a nobleman. The big guy retorts that it doesn't matter if the guy is noble or not, because having good shooting posture is the only thing that really counts in the test. At that, the older advisor just watches in silence, processing the competitor's arrogant justification. One of the veteran's partners excitedly points out that the archer is already preparing to let another arrow fly. At the inspector's command, the third shot rips through the air at an impressive speed. The makeshift stands go wild with the absurd power of the big guy's movement. But the wise man analyzes that the arrow's flight arc is too high, remembering that the ideal trajectory should be straight and low. Confirming the old man's theory, the projectile crosses the blue sky, gaining a lot of altitude instead of flying straight. Soon after, the arrow starts to lose power and falls in a parabolic arc on the horizon. The group of candidates watching the test goes into absolute shock as they realize where the shot is going to land. Instead of hitting the target, the wooden tip sticks right into the grass, kicking up dust. Validating the mistake, the official on the field waves the white flag and announces that the guy scored only 5 points in this round. Frustrated with his own error, the big guy grinds his teeth and breaks into a cold sweat, realizing he lost his chance at a perfect score. Watching the veteran quietly leave, the advisor gives a slight smile, confirming that his suspicions were dead on. The competitor returns to his spot on the grass with a much more humble posture than when he arrived. Immediately, the inspector calls up the next candidate to the line, making Sunsen raise his focused gaze. Our hero calmly stands up and walks to the wooden platform to take his position. Alongside the other contestants, he draws his bowstring, maintaining an unshakable focus on the target. With the bow fully drawn, the young man aims at the horizon with simply impeccable posture. Excited by the scene, the wise man lavishes praise on the boy's form, highlighting the elegance and dignity of his movement. As soon as the command to fire echoes across the field, the young man releases the string firmly. The arrow distorts the air around it, traveling at a brutal speed toward the target. The impact is so clean that the fabric target sinks in from the violence of the dead on hit. Since wooden arrows have rounded tips, they don't pierce the cloth. They just bounce off after confirming the hit. The official excitedly waves the red flag and declares 7 points for the perfect attack. From the stands on the grass, the big guy and his partner's eyes go wide, completely shocked by the kid's skill. Analyzing the power of the hit, the old man concludes that the boy had more than enough strength to pierce the target and earn extra points if he wanted to. Intrigued by the strategy, the advisor wonders why on earth the candidate would give up that advantage on purpose. With no time to rest, the official raises the flag, authorizing the start of the second round. The young warrior raises his bow again in a perfectly synchronized movement. With controlled breathing, he draws the string to its maximum, preparing for another shot. The young man draws the bow to its limit and locks his aim, fixing his eyes on the target up ahead. At the official's signal, he releases the tension from the string, sending the projectile straight for the target. The projectile cuts across the open field in the blink of an eye, maintaining a perfect, straight trajectory. Once again, the hit is flawless, making the target's cloth sway with the brute force of the impact. The evaluator wastes no time and signals the candidate's second excellent hit. Amazed, the advisor is left speechless, seeing that the boy repeated the millimeter, perfect precision of the first shot. The mood among the veterans grows heavy, and the big guy's face darkens as he realizes the rookie is a real threat. Completely focused on his goal, Yi Sun-sin adjusts his posture for the third and final attempt of this phase. Suddenly, the leaves on the surrounding trees begin to sway with a change in the weather. A strong gust of wind hits the training field unexpectedly, changing the entire dynamic of the test. Annoyed by the situation, the old man grumbles, questioning where this crazy wind came from right at the moment of the shot. Meanwhile, the big guy gives a sadistic smile, hoping that nature will ruin the kid's perfect score. Even with the wind hitting his face, our hero doesn't flinch and keeps the string drawn with total firmness. Cool and calculating, he analyzes the direction and strength of the wind coming from the northwest before making any move. The red flags on the platform whip around violently, confirming the intensity of the weather at that moment. Commanded by the official, the young man finally releases the last wooden arrow in the middle of that gale. Right after the shot, he quickly lowers his arm, following the tension of the bow. The arrow rips through the sky, catching a ride on the wind that sweeps across the grass sideways. The veterans' partners celebrate, thinking the shot went completely crooked and too high to hit. But the wise man notices a crucial detail: the boy lowered his shooting angle on purpose. Contrary to the naysayers, the arrow makes an absurd curve in the air, pushed exactly by the wind current. Not understanding the crazy physics of it, the entire crowd's eyes widen, confused by the curved trajectory. Focused, our hero fully trusts that the wind will carry the projectile exactly where he wants it to go. Defying all expectations, the wooden tip punishes the target dead on, completing the perfect round. The candidates let out murmurs of shock, completely dumbfounded by that display of pure talent. Conceding to the young man's skill, the advisor states that he is an archer of an absolutely absurd level. Feeling full of himself, the old man jokes that the only thing left was for the boy to pierce a willow leaf to reach his own level. In the background, the official beats the giant drum, officially logging the final points of that monstrous candidate. The gossip mill starts up on the grass, with everyone calculating that the big guy still has a slight edge thanks to his strength bonuses. Ignoring the others' point counting, the young man walks back to his corner in complete tranquility. Staring at the boy, the veteran gives a sadistic smile, admitting that facing someone good makes everything more fun. Our hero just listens to the big guy's taunt, maintaining a completely cold and unshakable expression. On the field, a new, much smaller target with a red center marking is positioned for the next challenge. From the top of the platform, the inspector announces that the second round will be done with short arrows and demands maximum precision for passing. This peculiar equipment consists of a small arrow fired through a bamboo tube, requiring a very advanced technique. With the rules explained, the authority calls candidate number 271 to open the trial. As the test continues, two high-ranking commanders observe everything from a distance, talking calmly. They comment on how the level of the young people has increased a lot this year, highlighting the monstrous 23 points the big guy scored. Intrigued by the name, the senior commander narrows his eyes, trying to remember who this person is. He recalls that the guy was an experienced soldier on the border who took out enemies and had the potential for promotion. Back to the test, a small arrow crosses the field and sticks exactly in the center of the red circle. The veteran simply crushes the competition, landing 3 perfect hits in the middle of the target and taking the maximum possible score. Pointing to the courtyard, the advisor confirms to his boss that the brute is the ex-soldier they were talking about. Looking through the shadows of the trees, the senior commander recognizes that his aggressive military posture is very different from the rookie's. The man in charge bets all his chips that this guy will finish in first place overall, and his colleague agrees immediately. Taking advantage of the walk through the courtyard, the senior commander decides to check on the performance of the other groups. The assistant agrees and quickly guides his boss. Right away, they watch another round of the trial from a distance. The field official announces a direct hit. The pair of suits walks to another shooting area in the forest. Just then, the inspector authorizes the second shot for candidate number 310. Very concentrated, the young Yi Sun-sin releases the bowstring, firing the small arrow through the bamboo tube with extreme precision. The projectile travels fast and lands perfectly in the center of the red marking. Impressed with the level, the boss asks if that young man also hit the target twice in a row, and the advisor confirms it. The veteran tries to remember who candidate 310 is, grumbling that it's impossible to remember people just by their numbers. Looking at the list, the advisor notes that the boy must be the famous Yi Sun-sin. The commander is surprised by the revelation. The assistant details that he paid attention to the kid because rumors said he was second only to the brute in the wooden arrow phase. Reflecting on the young man's past, the boss notes that his family doesn't have a great military tradition. He finds it bizarre that someone like that can shoot so well. The conversation is interrupted by the official's shout, confirming another excellent hit on the training field. Commenting on the perfect test, the inspector announces that the candidate aced the round. The senior commander is amazed. Quite excited, the boss comments on the heavy rivalry between the two prodigies and confesses that he can't wait for the final result. Far away, an official congratulates our hero on his flawless pass. Very humbly, the boy says that luck was on his side today. Listening to the chat from afar, the brute Jiyu, Guan glares at the rookie, realizing that the threat in the competition is real. The third round of the exam brings the challenge of heavy iron arrows. One of the contestants shakes all over trying to draw the bowstring. Struggling to maintain his posture, the guy grumbles that the equipment weighs a ton before finally shooting. When it's the big guy's turn, brutality speaks louder. He fires with ease and secures the maximum pass. Not falling behind, our hero also passes with ease, scoring 24 points. The official soon ends the stage. The pressure only increases as the fourth round begins at full steam, bringing the very complicated challenge of mounted archery. The first candidate gallops across the open field, holding the reins tightly and trying to focus his aim on the moving target. Calculating the exact moment of impact, the young man releases the string, firing the arrow. However, the abrupt motion of the shot throws him completely off balance on the running animal. Unable to hold onto the saddle, the warrior plummets to the ground at high speed, kicking up a huge cloud of dust. Immediately, the evaluator waves the red flag, eliminating the candidate for the brutal fall. On the ground, a young man sighs tensely at the difficulty. Trying to offer some insight, the official warns that it's forbidden to lean your body too far back when drawing the bow to avoid losing balance. Shortly after, the veteran takes his turn, showing off his technique. The inspector praises his inclined posture and absurd stability. Flying across the field, the brute maintains surgical focus and fires the arrow without the slightest hesitation. The projectile rips through the wind and hits the center of the target with a violent thud. Admiring the scene, the other candidates lavish praise on the veteran's talent. They're already anxious to see if the rookie can handle the challenge. Showing he's not there to mess around, the young master rides at full speed, exuding confidence on the course. With his body locked in the saddle, he draws the string to its limit and releases the arrow shot with ease. The metal tip finds its way perfectly, sticking in the target with no room for error. The crowd goes wild, recognizing the kid's talent. The guys comment that the race for first place is heating up. Without wasting time, the exam moves on to the fifth round, focused on mounted combat with a spear. The brute takes the lead again. At the sound of the starting shout, the veteran charges like an enraged bull, firmly gripping the handle of the wooden weapon. Calculating the space with millimeter precision, he positions the spear, aiming for the target scattered along the dirt track. With the speed of his horse supporting him, he pierces the first straw dummy with a devastating impact. Without slowing down, the warrior spins his body and shatters the second scarecrow with brutal ease. The sequence of perfect blows destroys the targets one by one amidst the dust kicked up by his mount. Finishing the tough course, the official confirms 20 points and validates the candidate's pass with 4 insane hits. Commenting on the result, the advisor notes that 4 hits is the absolute record so far. Immediately, the inspector points to the young hero, ordering him to get on the horse and face the track at once. Back at the starting line, the big guy passes by, staring at the kid, and mockingly says it's his turn to be embarrassed. Cocky, the veteran warns that piercing targets while running is almost impossible. He reminds him that a simple slip up with the spear can knock anyone off the saddle in an instant. Standing at the starting line, the young vigilante stares at the corridor filled with straw dummies, analyzing the entire length of the course. The official lowers his hand, authorizing the start with a deafening roar. In an explosive start, the young man rides at full speed and skewers the first target with a clean and very fast hit. Taking advantage of the momentum, he twists his wrist, driving the spear straight into the second scarecrow's chest without the slightest effort. The warrior maintains an absurd coolness, tearing through the targets as he crosses the dusty track. Overconfident, the big guy closes his eyes, thinking the rookie could land at most 2 hits before messing up. However, surprise hits hard when the evaluator shouts out the kid's third clean hit. The veteran even breaks into a cold sweat from the shock. Disbelieving what he heard, the brute questions his own hearing, refusing to accept his rival's insane technique. Defying all logic, the boy throws the spear to the other side, smashing the 4th target mid-course. The audience panics, realizing the rookie has tied with the record holder. They conclude that one more hit will secure the top of the podium. But the euphoria stops when a candidate, scared, points out that he can only see the horse running on the empty track. Pointing to the middle of the field, another competitor yells that the boy is still hanging off the side of the saddle. Indeed, our hero defies gravity, riding practically lying on the side of the moving animal. With his focus high, he remembers that in his nightmare, the huge distance knocked him off the horse. The crazy solution was to use his own body to shorten that space. Almost scraping his face on the ground, the young man stretches his arm with all his might, preparing the final thrust to win. The suicidal plan works perfectly. The wooden tip goes through the fifth scarecrow, declaring his absolute victory. The candidates are in collective shock at the boy's genius. They gossip, amazed that he took the overall lead in the competition on pure talent. Gathering the survivors in the main palace courtyard, the authority congratulates the troops' courage for making it this far in the exam. Cutting the emotion short, he bluntly announces that only 25 men from that crowd will advance to the grand final test. The commander takes the front of the platform, recalling that the final stage is usually a game of polo. But with a mysterious smile, he reveals that the evaluators decided to change the test format at the last minute. A nervous murmur spreads among the candidates. They whisper tensely about how they've never heard of a rule change like this. Ignoring the complaints, the advisor decrees that the final round will focus exclusively on hand-to-hand combat using short weapons. To worsen the tension, he announces that the duels won't be between the contestants themselves. Panic hits the young men's faces hard. Cold as ice, the young hero maintains his unshakable expression, listening to the new, cruel evaluation rules. Pointing to the back of the courtyard, the man in charge reveals that the rookies will have to go head-to-head with professional soldiers from the army itself. Shaking with fear at the news, the kids turn around to see who the maniacs are that will be beating them up. Stomping heavily on the stone ground, the active, duty guards advance with an extremely imposing posture for the combat. Facing the brutal difference in size and experience, the rookies swallow hard, realizing they are at a huge disadvantage. Taking a deep, calm breath, the young master recognizes that he has reached the final wall of his challenge, accepting the fight with an open heart. The candidate with the headband sighs in relief for having made it this far using his bow and horsemanship, admitting he barely knows how to hold a sword. Even so, he walks calmly, saying goodbye to his colleagues who promise to cheer for him from the stands. In the middle of the giant courtyard, the commander goes over the rules for the final stage, announcing that the wooden sword duels will last about 23 minutes. He states that defeating a soldier earns 45 points, but if the fight ends without a winner, the score is 0, and a loss means immediate elimination. The news hits the rookies like a bomb, and they panic upon realizing that a draw won't secure them a spot. Continuing with the deadly exam, the inspector shouts, calling candidate 17 and soldier number 1 to the dirt arena. The two warriors step into the circle marked on the ground and face each other, ready to settle things with their fists. With a confident little smile, the active, duty guard draws his wooden sword without a shred of fear. On the other side, the rookie holds his own weapon, trembling from head to toe, feeling the immense pressure of the moment. With no other choice, the young man charges forward, screaming with all his might to try and surprise the veteran. But the soldier just deflects the sequence of blows with incredible ease, without even needing to move from his spot. Trying to force an opening any way he can, the candidate raises his sword and brings down an attack with double the force. With sharp reflexes, the guard dodges the violent blow with a very quick and smooth movement. Taking advantage of the kid's open guard, the veteran immediately parries the wooden blade, stopping the attack on the spot. The impact pushes the rookie's weapon down, leaving him completely vulnerable to a counter-attack. Completely out of breath, the candidate realizes his attacks aren't even tickling the guy and that he's just wasting his own energy. Without breaking his pose, the veteran calmly asks if the boy has any more tricks up his sleeve to show. The rookie swallows hard, breaking into a cold sweat as he realizes the skill gap between them is a giant chasm. Sensing the weakness, the soldier announces he's going to end this game once and for all and charges forward. In a burst of speed, the soldier unleashes a crushing sequence of blows that the boy can barely block. The force of the hits is so absurd that the rookie's foot slides on the dirt, completely losing his footing. Unable to withstand the pressure, the candidate falls backward onto the ground, kicking up a cloud of dust in the arena. The tip of the wooden sword stops millimeters from the young man's face, sealing the soldier's immediate victory. Right then, the inspector shouts for everyone to hear that candidate 17 is officially eliminated from the exam. Watching the beatdown from the sidelines, the brute Jiu Guan gives a sadistic smile, celebrating that the test has finally gotten interesting. Meanwhile, the young Yi Sunsen notices this confidence and wonders to himself if the guy really thinks he can take down an active, duty soldier. At that exact moment, two army officers approach the big guy, wanting to confirm his identity. The brute confirms it's him, but is curious to know the reason for the sudden approach. The official just says that someone important wants to talk to him and tells the guy to follow them. Meanwhile, the beatdown continues on the field, and another rookie takes a brutal hit, getting eliminated without mercy. The slaughter continues in the arena, with Candidate 60, 2 sent flying after a fatal blow from a wooden sword. From the top of the platform, the officials grumble, worried if they'll be able to pick out the 25 approved candidates with the troops taking such a beating. But the older advisor assures them there's no stress, as they can just fill the spots by adding up the scores from the previous tests. Staying calm, he asks for patience to see if at least one of those kids can pull off the miracle of taking down a veteran. Far away, the bloodbath continues, eliminating Candidate 202 under our hero's sharp and calculating gaze. Behind the pavilions, Jiu Guan follows his escort, a bit apprehensive, knowing he can't be gone for too long before being called to fight. As soon as they reach an isolated balcony, a well-dressed man turns around and asks if the brute still remembers him. Upon recognizing the guy's face, the big guy's eyes widen, getting a huge shock from the surprise. With a nostalgic smile, the officer confirms that he's Dong Chu, the partner who fought side by side with him on the border. The veteran's tough expression softens instantly, stating it would be impossible to forget a partner like him. Struck with heavy regret, the official lowers his head, confessing his guilt for letting his friend leave that day. The officer lays it on the line, saying that all the soldiers from that time owe their lives to the big guy, and that no one there has forgotten his sacrifice. Laughing at the situation, Jiu Guan tells his partner to let go of that silly guilt, reminding him that the troubled past is long gone. The official remembers that his friend lost his own position because of it, but the brute says he doesn't regret it because it was the right thing to do. Sensing the tense atmosphere, the soldier cuts the small talk and suggests they save the gossip for later, focusing entirely on the ongoing exam. Wishing him luck, the officer lets his friend go and says his help will be guaranteed if the big guy needs it in the future. However, as soon as the candidate turns his back to return to the arena, he freezes mid-step upon hearing his own name. His friend asks him to wait a second, commenting that his time in service makes the big guy a big shot among the rookies there. Confirming the gossip, the brute asks back, wanting to know where the guy is going with all this small talk. In a very serious tone, the officer confesses that he actually has a very peculiar favor to ask about someone he can't get off his mind. With a sly, malicious smile, the soldier states that the big guy's raw talent is exactly what he needs to settle this matter. Back in the dirt courtyard, the authority excitedly announces the turn of Candidate 307, making the commander curious to see the action. Exuding his usual confidence, the veteran steps into the arena while the audience whispers, swearing he's the only one with a chance to win. Without any delay, the exam official lowers his arm, yelling for the brawl to begin in the circle. In a fraction of a second, the two warriors charge at each other with a brutal clash of swords that echoes throughout the field. Sliding through the dust, the candidate dodges the enemy's charge and prepares his own counter-attack. The guard tries an aggressive leap for a downward cut, but the big guy spins his body, blocking the blow in mid-air. The frank exchange continues frantically, with the wooden swords clashing firmly, neither one of them backing down an inch. Being pushed back, the active duty soldier locks his guard, asking in shock where that rookie learned to fight like that. Holding back the enemy's blade with brute force, Jiu Guan gives a mocking smile, revealing that he was once an official soldier too. Telling the guard to fight seriously, the brute advances, bringing down the hammer and warning that the guy might end up being the first soldier to be embarrassed today. From the makeshift stands, the rookies go wild, realizing their buddy is not only holding his own but is actually making the professional retreat. Focused on analyzing his rival's combat style, the young Yi Sunsen watches the duel in absolute silence. The clash of wood reigns in the middle of the field, with the two giants trading heavy blows without stopping to breathe. Suddenly, the official steps in between them, calling a halt and declaring that the time limit has expired and the fight is a draw. Completely impressed by the result, the contestants gossip that holding an official soldier to a draw is already an absurdly legendary feat. On the platform, the commander also applauds the performance, recognizing that the brute's display was a spectacle of raw power. Reaching the exam's climax, the inspector finally shouts the name of Candidate 310, summoning our hero to the central courtyard. Confirming the boy's file, the officials comment that he's the kid who stole first place in the horse round. Despite praising the incredible achievement for the young man's age, the commander points out that fighting hand to hand with a sword is a whole different beast. Doubting our hero's ability, The old man bets that his lack of experience with a sword will quickly knock him from the top of the leaderboard. Resuming the exam ritual, the authority turns to the tent and calls for Soldier 7 to take his combat position in the circle. Trying to instill confidence, one of the guards tells his colleague not to worry because the opponent is just a cocky little punk. However, before the summoned soldier can take a step forward, a gigantic, heavy hand grabs his shoulder by surprise. With a dark look in his eyes, the big guy Jiu Guan blocks the guard and coldly announces that he's the one who's going to pulverize that kid. Sweating nervously, an officer questions in shock if the instructor himself is going to cross swords with a first phase candidate. Chatting in the courtyard, his colleague admits the request is pretty bizarre but assures him there's a good reason behind it. He explains that the boy got arrogant after doing well in the tests and has been bragging that he could play around with the soldiers. Worried, the guy warns that any slip up would tarnish the troops' honor and that shame would fall even on their instructor. At that, the boss himself coldly agrees with the idea, deciding to knock all that cockiness out of the kid right away. With a sharp gaze, he confirms he will take the fight against Candidate 300 and tend to show him true military strength. Now, in the center of the dirt arena, the judge observes the two opponents in position and shouts to authorize the start of combat. Before launching his attack, the instructor warns the young Yi Sun-sin that he won't go easy and tells him not to cry if he gets hurt. Firm in his stance, the veteran throws it in his face that he's going to teach him the danger of underestimating the troops and being arrogant for no reason. Completely confused by the unprovoked lecture, the young man is left wondering where the guy got this crazy story about him underestimating soldiers. Far from the arena, the streets of the commercial village are bustling and calm under the sun. In the middle of the market, a fortune teller shakes his bamboo sticks nonstop while reciting some totally strange magic words. Right after, he pulls one of the sticks from the jar, announcing that he will reveal the client's fortune. The diviner decrees that fate is sealed, leaving the young man in front of him dying of anxiety to know the result. With the reading ready, the charlatan spouts a super complex explanation about hexagrams and mountains, leaving the client looking completely lost. Annoyed with the runaround, the young man demands that the fortune teller give the prediction in a simple way he can actually understand. Without losing his composure, the diviner translates the mystical gossip and guarantees that the boy will pass the test successfully. The client gets furious, complaining that everyone says the same thing and questions if the guy really trained with a famous master. Bothered by the accusation, the swindler tells the kid to stop wasting time and get lost if he's not going to pay for the reading. Tired of wasting energy on it, the young man sighs heavily and decides to end his quest for predictions for the day. The fortune teller packs up his things, grumbling about the young man's rudeness, but finds it very bizarre that the boy always gets the exact same fortune. Back on the street, the young G-man lets out a discouraged breath, admitting he thought the fortune tellers would figure out the scam quickly. He counts some coins in his hand, realizing that the game to kill time ended up making him a good bit of money in the end. Worried about his friend, the kid hopes for the young Yi Sun-sin's success and reflects that he himself needed a real prediction. Back in the arena, the instructor charges forward, screaming, and delivers a brutal blow with his wooden sword. Focused on defense, our hero holds his own weapon with both hands to withstand the coming impact. The two warriors exchange a frantic sequence of attacks and defenses that makes the swords crackle loudly in the arena. With his arms trembling, the young man realizes with a start that the enemy's wooden weapon hits with the weight of an iron club. Under full pressure, the veteran lays it on the line, warning that he won't give the boy an inch of room to counterattack. Unable to breathe, the rookie continues to just block the violent storm of blows raining down on him. The instructor spins his sword for another attack and admits that the kid is holding up much better than he expected. In a split second, the young master dodges the heavy cut that rips through the air right next to his face. He quickly retreats and plants his feet, locking eyes with the enemy, muttering to himself about the difficulty of the fight. Relentless, the veteran closes the distance again, shouting that his promise of giving no slack is more than kept. In the audience, the officials comment in shock how the boy who dominated the other tests is now being massacred. The other rookies watch the beatdown, disappointed, concluding that mastering the sword is too much to ask for someone his age. From his prime seat, the big guy shows pure malice, loving to see his rival getting thrashed without being able to fight back. The frantic pace slows for a moment, revealing our hero completely breathless and worn out from staying on the defensive. The official scoffs, asking if the kid is already tired just from defending, questioning how he thinks he'll become a soldier like this. With his eyes fixed on his rival, the young man notices the guy's posture is strange, attacking with a very personal brutality. He swallows his fatigue and concludes that a real war would be worse. deciding he needs to endure the pressure if he wants to move up in life. With a focused and deadly look, the warrior demands his own body to react, planning to use the enemy's aggression to his advantage. At that, the veteran leaps with all his might for an aerial strike, telling the boy to drop his weapon and give up if he's scared. However, the official's confident expression crumbles in an instant, replaced by absolute shock in mid-air. The reason for the shock is the young master's icy gaze, who has finally abandoned defense to truly face the combat. Without a second's hesitation, the boy parries the enemy's blow and follows up with a counterattack, spinning his own sword in the air. The rookie audience's eyes widen in amazement at the abrupt change, commenting that the kid seems to have become a different person. The two warriors once again cross wood violently, but now the rookie answers the attacks as an equal. Startled by the unexpected strength, the instructor grits his teeth, sweating nervously, wanting to know what demonic energy has taken over the boy. In a clash of brute force, our hero mentally swears that he may not win so easily, but he absolutely will not lose. Getting close, he throws a dirty leg sweep that hits the completely distracted soldier's support leg dead on. Unable to keep his balance, the official loses his footing and tumbles backward onto the dirt, kicking up a cloud of dust. The rookies are in shock, desperately questioning if it's even allowed to use your feet in a sword fighting test. But the veteran ignores the pain and immediately spins his sword, gaining momentum to recover from the fall right away. In an absurd fury, the instructor jumps, opening his entire guard and preparing a devastating blow aimed at the kid's head. Completely consumed by hatred, the official brings down the attack, screaming at the top of his lungs to crush his opponent. Cool and calculating, the young man just follows the enemy's suicidal move, descending toward him at 1,000 miles per hour. The other candidates lose their breath, thinking the veteran has completely lost his mind to attempt a lethal attack like that. With perfect body movement, our hero slides to the side, making the violent blow cut through nothing but empty air. The audience is left speechless, confirming that the boy dodged a deadly attack in a fraction of a second using pure reflex. With the veteran's weapon stuck in the dirt, the official yells, stopping the fight and announcing that the time limit is up. On the platform, the officials are confused about the result, assessing that the officer dominated, but the boy resorted to a leg sweep. The commander sets the record straight, saying that in war, using your feet is fair game, so he decides to give the technical victory to the instructor. Gossip spreads on the grass as the kids find out about the guy's rank and wonder why the chief only fought against that one boy. Under the chief's orders, the official announces loud and clear in the courtyard that candidate 310 is the big loser. Faced with the unfair elimination, our hero just lowers his head and closes his eyes, accepting his own fate with the utmost calm. Against all military protocol, the instructor raises his voice, sweating nervously, and confesses in front of everyone that he was the one who lost. The shock is universal among the candidates, who don't understand why the guy is rejecting the guaranteed victory the big shots gave him. With no pride, the veteran explains to the crowd that the kid perfectly dodged the strongest attack he had. The memory of the blow flashes in his mind, recalling the exact moment the boy locked his sword in the final position. He humbly admits that the tip of the wooden weapon was pressed directly against his neck before time ran out. The official states that in a real battle, he would have been beheaded, and for that reason, he declares the rookie the true champion of the duel. With that honorable recognition, the young master looks up, completely surprised by the soldier's absurd sincerity. On the platform, the commander hears his own subordinate's confession and glances to the side, processing that crazy breach of hierarchy. For the honor of the battlefield, the authority nods in agreement to reverse the final decision of the military exam. Taking the lead, the commander bellows in the middle of the arena that the score has been changed and declares Yi Sun-sun the absolute winner of the 6th round. The rookies go wild, celebrating hard for finally seeing a candidate defeat an official soldier in the test. Far from the party, the big veteran watches the scene in silence, processing his rival's absurd skill. Nearby, the instructor praises our hero's courage and acknowledges that his first-place overall finish wasn't won by luck. But he quickly cuts the mood, seriously warning the boy not to let his ego get inflated because arrogance destroys any warrior. The young man listens to the lecture in silence, realizing that this tough talk isn't an empty taunt, but genuine advice. As he turns to leave, the official stops and says he has one more thing to say. Maintaining respect, he reminds him that the next phases of the exam will be even worse and demands that the rookie earn his position. Full of confidence, the soldier says he looks forward to fighting him again in the future, guaranteeing that next time he won't be the loser. Facing the official as an equal, the young warrior accepts the challenge on the spot and states that he'll be counting the days until their reunion. The great drums echo through the palace, decreeing the end of that year's exam and ordering all candidates to bow in respect. The crowd begins to disperse through the courtyard as a young man excitedly comments that our hero secured the top spot on the list of approved candidates. Laughing, the young Jimin agrees it was worth sneaking in to spy on the test and already imagines the party the village will throw. Suddenly, the conversation is interrupted by someone running and shouting for the fake fortune teller in the middle of the crowd. Trying to play it cool, Jimin makes up a flimsy excuse, pretending he was only there to thank the fortune teller for his prediction. Playing along, our hero calls his friend a talented fortune teller and says goodbye, leaving the young man sweating nervously. Not understanding the theatrics at all, the warrior's test mate asks where all that familiarity came from. His face hardening, the warrior backs his friend into a corner, asking if he was swindling others by pretending to be a fortune teller. Far from the bustling capital, the port of Azin wakes up to a calm morning by the sunlit river. Disembarking from a wooden boat, the young Yanhwa arrives in the village accompanied by her trusted servant. Passing by a tavern, the two overhear residents excitedly gossiping about the warrior's perfect performance in the exams. The maid happily comments that the entire province is talking about the young master and his huge achievement. At the next table, peasants toast to the victory, exclaiming that the hero's family will finally have someone in the royal court. On the other side of the bar, a man in fine clothes overhears the celebration and cuts the mood, saying the kid did nothing more than his duty. Full of envy, he lays it on the line that passing the first phase doesn't guarantee a position and that without money, the boy will end up forgotten. Standing on the road, Yanhwa follows the discussion in the tavern, paying close attention to the political gossip. Being quite cynical, the well-dressed man drinks his wine and questions if the young man's family has any money or power to sponsor a promotion. Annoyed by the mockery, one of the peasants retorts, remembering that the warrior's uncle once held a good position. The arrogant man lets out a mocking laugh, stating that an old position is worthless in a country run by elite connections. The others swallow hard when the man mentions that the real control is in the hands of the highest authorities of the crown. Keeping up the pressure, the man recalls the tragic story of when a rebel called the current king a tyrant and was put down for treason. The man details how this rebellion caused a bloodbath, making dozens of scholars lose their heads for nothing. With a dark look in his eyes, he states that the absolute control of the monarchy is a true curse upon the people. Terrified by the suicidal talk, the residents jump up from the table at once, scared to death of getting caught up in the mess. Yanhwa's servant watches the peasants flee and warns that speaking ill of the monarchy in public is asking for trouble. Without backing down, the young woman quietly confesses that the man isn't lying, as silence will never change the cruelty of the world. Calm reigns in the residence's courtyard the next day, where a servant peacefully sweeps the ground. Inside, the older brother enters the room asking about lunch, but Yi Sun-sun refuses the food, focusing on his paperwork. Curious about his dedication, the veteran asks what the young man is writing that's so important, he's ignoring his own hunger. Very seriously, the warrior takes advantage of his relative's presence and asks for an extremely urgent favor. Immediately, he extends his hand, offering an envelope completely sealed with wax. The young man instructs his older brother to travel to the capital and deliver the letter personally to Prince Haezong, Gun. In addition to the secret journey, he demands that the sender's identity remain an absolute secret. The brother holds the paper confused and questions the reason for this, as it has nothing to do with the official exams. Avoiding details, our hero says he will only reveal the truth when he is absolutely certain of the plan. Processing the situation, he reflects that the noble's survival until the age of 16 is still an unknown. The relative is completely lost and confesses that this story is too confusing for him. Cutting the chat short, the young vigilant says there is one more important mission to be done in the capital. He asks his family member to use the trip to discreetly investigate the whereabouts of a specific person. Far away, the dusk illuminates the huge mansion of the crown minister with an apparent tranquility. The young Yanhwa is kneeling in the main room, paying her respects to her father after her trip. The veteran comments that the girl's grandfather's health has improved and his complexion was much better. He explains that her mother stayed behind to care for the sick man and asked for no one to be anxious about the delay. Worried about his daughter's exhaustion, the father tells her to return to her chambers and rest from the long journey. Subtly changing the subject, Yanhwa asks if her old man really studied with Minister Donggo. Confirming the story, the man recounts their shared past and finds her sudden interest strange. The girl insists on the topic, wanting to know if the age difference hindered their friendship in the royal court. Full of ulterior motives, she stands up with great charm and offers to give him a relaxing massage. Knowing her games, the father pushes her hands away and tells her to spill the beans about what she really wants. Playing dumb, the young woman swears she has no hidden agenda, but promises to call in the favor in the future if she needs to. Time flies to the third lunar month of the year 1564. In the kingdom's capital, flags flutter on the immense walls of the Hanyang Military Training Command. The gigantic courtyard is completely packed with candidates sitting on the ground, awaiting the start of the exam. In the midst of that anxious crowd, Yi Sun-sin maintains an impeccable posture, waiting patiently for orders. In the main tent, the government's board of examiners observes the competition with brutal seriousness. The military minister assesses the clear weather on the field and asks his fellow board members if it's time to begin. The head examiner agrees with the time and decrees the immediate start of the official evaluations. Without wasting time, he orders the guards to display this year's essay topic for all present. One of the court officials steps forward, holding a very thick scroll in his hands. With an abrupt movement, he unrolls the paper and displays the massive content for the crowd in the courtyard. Immediately, a nervous murmur spreads among the young men, who begin to gossip about the difficulty of the test. The text demands a viable solution for the lack of copper in the manufacturing of firearms that protect the country. Analyzing the problem, the rookies conclude that the question focuses exactly on the production of military muskets. One young man whispers that the answer is obvious, as the government has already suggested melting temple bells to get metal. Yi Sun-sin reflects in silence, finding it very suspicious that the board would give a test where everyone knows the standard answer. Though with his mind racing, the warrior deduces that there is a gigantic obstacle in this idea of melting sacred bells. He recalls the figure of King Myeonjong sitting on the golden throne, dealing with this exact problem. In the memory, the monarch holds the reports, furious, demanding to know whose crazy idea it was to melt everything. A minister tries to justify himself, saying the generals begged for it due to a desperate shortage of weapons. Putting his foot down, the king forbids the destruction of the artifacts, firmly believing that spirits inhabit the ancient objects. Back in reality, our hero realizes the board knows the king's faith and is actually looking for an alternative solution. With the strategy formed in his head, the young master glides his brush across the paper without the slightest hesitation. Hours later, the official's deep voice echoes through the courtyard, decreeing the absolute end of the trial. Chaos begins on the lawn as guards go around collecting the finished essays from the kids. Maintaining his composure, our hero rolls up his own document and hands it to the official responsible for collection. In the main tent, the officials gather, evaluating each of the texts with an extremely critical eye. The head examiner holds up a test and suggests that candidate 17 take first place in the competition. Disagreeing flatly, a colleague points out that number 29's essay presented a much more practical idea. A third minister loses his patience and deems it crazy to recommend iron mining to cover the copper shortage. The evaluator defends the young man, stating that the land is rich in iron, making mass production very feasible. Scoffing at the alternative, the annoyed old man doubts that an iron musket could ever match the official weapons. Sticking to his guns, the minister insists the force would be immense if it were well constructed, just like a Japanese weapon he had seen. The old man doubts the candidates would know about these enemy weapons, but ends up admitting the text was written with a lot of logic. To put it to the test, the head examiner sends a soldier to the military arsenal to fetch the foreign weapon at once. Surprised by the drastic action, the old man questions in the middle of the courtyard who this candidate 29 is. Taking responsibility, the warrior stands up in the crowd and claims authorship of that essay. Bowing politely, the young man humbly introduces himself, revealing his own name and the province he came from. Pointing a finger, the annoyed minister warns that he will test the theory in practice and promises severe punishment if it's a bluff. Some time later, the guards bring the exact enemy musket mentioned in the text, with all the necessary gunpowder. The heavy armament is carefully placed on a wooden table right in the center of the evaluation field. Standing in front of the equipment, the young man assesses the distance to a circular target set up at the far end of the dirt courtyard. Mockingly, the official challenges the boy to shoot, demanding that it all prove in practice that he knows how to use it. The old man laughs, thinking the rookie is a nobody who just wrote down gossip about technologies he's never even seen. Internally, our hero understands the distrust, as in that adolescent body, it would be impossible to have ever touched such a weapon. With mental irony, he concludes that the board has no idea of the past lives he carries. The vigilante picks up the heavy iron weapon, demonstrating a familiarity that completely shocks the officials on the platform. Suddenly, a strong memory hits, showing the moment a general asked for a huge favor with great urgency. In the memory, the military leader handed over a complex blueprint, wanting to know if the former hero could manufacture the item. Analyzing the plans in the hot forge, the armor admitted the process was difficult, but guaranteed it could be assembled. Putting on the pressure, the general demanded immediate construction, warning that the nation's future depended on that technology. Finishing the memory, the marksman appears, handing over the perfectly completed equipment to the commander's delight. Looking back, the general had complained about the weapon's insane weight. Right away, he ordered the blacksmith to reduce it and also to lighten up the trigger, which was way too stiff. The leader demanded the space between the sight and the barrel be reduced. He also instructed him to fix the cover and the ramrod, which were not up to his standards. Back in the present, our hero fondly recalls the moment the soldier delivered the finished weapon, and he praised the young man's hard work. The calm is soon shattered by the examiner's furious shout, demanding why the kid is standing there like a statue instead of shooting already. Snapping out of his thoughts, the warrior holds the heavy iron weapon with extreme firmness, showing he's not there to mess around. With supernatural movements, the young man fits the cleaning rod straight into the musket's barrel and begins to prepare the equipment. Right after, he grabs the flask with great agility and pours the exact measure of gunpowder into the weapon. Without showing any doubt, the vigilante adds the round ammunition into the barrel, perfectly following the foreign military procedure. Pushing the paper wadding down, he opens the cover and finishes by pouring a little more fine powder into the side compartment. The ministers watch the scene in total shock. One of them points out, perplexed, that the rookie is loading the weapon in the exact order and wonders where he learned that. Maintaining total focus, our hero lights the fuse and blows on the small flame to ensure ignition happens at the right moment. Then he raises the heavy musket, aligning the iron barrel directly with the target set up at the far end of the courtyard. The arrogant minister starts to sweat nervously at that impeccable posture, feeling a huge dread just imagining what would happen if the boy hit the shot. A brutal boom deafens the field as the shot rips through the air in an explosion of smoke and fire. The old men on the platform are left speechless, processing the shock and confirming in disbelief that the boy actually fired. After the gun's blast, the young warrior keeps his eyes fixed ahead, following the lethal trajectory he just sent. The lead projectile travels at an absurd speed across the open field, cutting through the wind toward the circular mark. With a sharp, violent thud, the bullet hits the wooden board in the middle of the marking, sending splinters flying everywhere. Completely terrified by the impact, one of the ministers stammers and yells for a soldier to go check the damage immediately. With the job done, the boy calmly lowers the musket as the thin smoke from the gunpowder rises through the dirt courtyard. The guard on the field runs to the red canvas, announces loudly that the ammunition went clean through the wooden structure. The impact was so brutal that the lead pierced through the thick planks, leaving a frightening hole right in the target. Satisfied with the test, an official states that the machine's firepower is unbelievable, already seeking confirmation from his grumpy colleague. Stubborn, the old man argues that the weapon takes too long to load and that Jojin's archers can fire 5 arrows in the same interval. Tired of the excuses, his partner accuses the old man of being stubborn since iron weapons would be a huge advancement and questions his refusal to approve the boy. No way out, the grumpy minister loses his patience and says he didn't want to bring it up, but giving first place to the rookie is simply impossible. Shocked by the breach of protocol, the other evaluator's eyes widen, and he questions what that craziness means. Lowering his voice, the official confesses that approving number 29 will deeply anger the chief state counselor. At that, the examiner finally understands that all this stalling was just to ensure that a candidate with strong backing would get first place. A few days later, the palace courtyard finally breathes peace, as the military exam was officially concluded and the list of approved candidates would be out soon. The sound of heavy wooden doors opening echoes through the place, breaking the calm of the sunny morning. A crowd gathers at the main entrance as the approved candidates begin to leave, and families shout for their relatives. Anxious, a father grabs his son, wanting gossip about the test, but the poor guy lowers his head in frustration, admitting it was a total disaster. The young man explains that the selection is very rigorous and that finding your own name among the very few approved is practically a miracle. With a cynical smile, the rich old man tells the kid to relax, assuring him that the bribe money has already solved any grade problems. On the other side of the street, the young Jimin grumbles to himself, noticing that all the candidates have left except for the friend he was looking for. Suddenly, the kid's attention is stolen by a figure walking calmly out of the palace. All excited, he raises his arm high and waves desperately, calling for our hero in the middle of the confusion. As soon as they meet, the boy finds his friend's sour face strange and asks if the test went badly, but the warrior assures him everything was fine. Confused, Jimin doesn't understand the anxiety, and the vigilante confesses he has a very bad feeling despite doing well on the evaluation. The conversation is suddenly cut short by a deep voice greeting our hero from behind, making him turn around in surprise to see who it is. The big veteran exudes confidence, confirming that he's the famous Joju Kwon and jokes, hoping the rookie still remembers him. Sometime later, the calm bustle of the capital continues its normal course under the bright afternoon sun. Away from the courtyard's mess, the three decide to sit at an outdoor wooden table for a drink and to catch up. Amazed by the bizarre scene from the exam, the brute praises the absurd way the boy handled that foreign weapon without the slightest effort. Returning the politeness to change the subject, the young master remembers that his colleague also took the test and asks if the result was good. Being very honest, the big guy confesses he did terribly in the practical evaluation, but is hoping his score from the first phase will keep him from failing outright. Extremely curious, the ex-soldier insists on knowing how the kid mastered a rifle that even army veterans barely know. Picking a fight for no reason, the hot-headed Jimin jumps in and tells the brute to shut up, praising his partner's absurd skill level. Finding the kid cocky, the veteran's face darkens, warning that the curiosity is valid, and tells the punk to tone it down. Utterly offended, the boy flips out and throws it in his face that a middle-class guy shouldn't speak so informally to a noble. The ex-soldier gets in the kid's face, scaring him, and mockingly forces out a respectful title with heavy irony. The tense atmosphere finally dissipates as night falls, covering the village rooftops with a dense, silent darkness. Walking back, Jimin kicks the dust, fuming with anger for being humiliated by a guy he considered inferior. Still furious, the boy demands to know who that disrespectful maniac was, and the warrior just confirms it was his rival from the first exam. Changing the subject drastically, the vigilant looks at his friend and asks for the results of that secret investigation he had requested earlier. The kid realizes he's talking about their friend Seo. Ian confirms that the man is still isolated in a hermitage, focused on studying for the June exam. Our hero analyzes the name of the place and decides that, since it's on the mountain and already dark, they'll make the trip at dawn. Impressed by the rumors, the boy asks if the scholar is really a genius in medicine and divination. The older one confirms his fame is well-deserved. This whole conversation makes the young man super anxious, creating a huge desire to meet the guy with such an incredible reputation in person. Hidden in complete darkness, a mysterious figure observes the surroundings with a totally dark and calculating gaze. Advancing through the cold dawn, the pair of young men climbs the heavy dirt trail of Gwanaksan Mountain in absolute silence. Out of breath, Jimin breaks the ice, hoping that the exhausting hike will really lead them straight to the isolated cabin as rumored. Our hero confesses the slope is worse than he imagined, but figures they should be getting close to their destination. Just then, the older one lifts his head and points to the horizon, finally spotting the structure hidden among the trees. Secluded from everything and everyone, the small, rustic residence rests silently on the hilltop in the middle of the dense forest. Only a yellowish light shines brightly through the paper window of the modest house, contrasting with the dark night around. Thinking about security, the warrior tells his partner to go ahead and check the house to see if the resident is accepting visitors. Obeying the order without question, the younger boy climbs the rest of the trail, leaving his friend to watch the perimeter from behind. While waiting in the darkness, the vigilant notices a soft, repetitive chirping echoing from the high treetops. Looking up at the leaves, he gives a slight smile, easily deducing that the sound is coming from a nest full of baby birds. The peace shatters in a split second when a masked man leaps from the treetops, delivering a sword strike in the dark. Thanks to his instincts, the young man ducks with absurd speed, feeling the enemy's blade just graze the air right next to his body. Lying on the ground in a failed attack pose, the black-clad assassin praises the kid's sharp vision to dodge such a lethal blow. Despite the huge shock, our hero doesn't back down an inch and immediately glares at the thug, demanding his identity. With agility, the young master raises his arm and blocks the assassin's dagger with his own sword's sheath in a fraction of a second. The impact pushes our hero back, making him slide through the dust as he takes a deep breath to stay calm. Impressed by the reflex, the masked man praises the quick defense that saved the boy's life from that surprise attack. Without letting his guard down, the vigilant questions who the man is and what he wants, attacking someone out of nowhere in the middle of the night. Acting tough, the thug says he won't get any answers and tells the kid to just accept his reality. Staring at the enemy with a deadly gaze, the young man realizes the situation is much more serious than he imagined. Immediately, he gets into a combat stance and says it's no problem if the guy refuses to say who sent him. But the warrior leaves a very clear warning, asking the assassin to remember a very important detail before continuing. Pointing a finger, our hero throws it in his face that no matter who the mastermind is, they will never get what they want. Annoyed by the audacity, the masked man curses the boy as a chatty punk and charges forward, kicking up dust. In a quick exchange, the clash of blades echoes through the forest as the two fight in the darkness. Delivering more blows, the assassin scoffs, saying the boy doesn't understand that his life is in his hands. A sharp blade cuts through the air at 1,000 miles per hour, passing millimeters from the warrior's face in a near-fatal attack. However, the masked man is startled when he loses sight of his opponent in an instant. Seizing the perfect opening, our hero ducks under the cut and drives the tip of his sheath right into the thug's ribs. The blow is so violent that the assassin flies backward through the air, completely losing his balance on impact. Unable to right himself, the criminal tumbles hard and scrapes his entire body on the mountain's dirt ground. Lying in the dust, the man grumbles in surprise, admitting he wasn't expecting to get a beatdown like that. With difficulty, the enemy slowly gets up, holding his bruised rib from the direct hit. Staying calm, Yi Sun-sin suggests they pretend nothing happened and tells the guy to go back the way he came. Outraged by the offense, the thug asks if the kid is actually worried about his well-being. He finds it absurd and says the boy should be on his knees begging for his life instead of playing the good guy. At that, the masked man pulls another dagger from his clothes and warns it if it were going to end like this, he wouldn't have even started the job. Suddenly, the assassin gets a huge shock as he sees a mysterious object flying straight at his face. A rock thrown from the darkness hits the criminal squarely in the forehead, stopping his attack before it even begins. Hidden in the shadows, Jimin appears, telling the thug to grab something to defend himself if he wants to stay alive. Not understanding a thing, our hero looks to the side, a bit confused, and says he didn't tell the guy to grab anything. The boy steps out from the bushes holding rocks and complains that he wasted a good shot, leaving his friend relieved by his arrival. Right behind the kid, two well-dressed scholars appear hurriedly, asking if the warrior is hurt. Seeing the duo in the middle of the forest, the young man smiles widely and recognizes his friend Seo instantly. While the young man tries to explain the situation, the assassin realizes the numerical disadvantage has just gotten really bad for him. The masked man grinds his teeth, admitting to himself that he took too long and ended up ruining the whole plan. Without a second thought, the coward leaps into the trees, announcing that the confrontation will have to wait. Furious with the escape, Jimin throws another rock, yelling at the thug for bailing on the fight. But before the boy can chase after the criminal, the other scholar extends his arm and stops him. The older man tells the kid to calm down and let the assassin flee to avoid more trouble. Annoyed by the order, Jimin questions why they aren't pursuing a guy who tried to take out their friend. Ignoring the stress, Seo focuses on the warrior and asks how he's been after so long. To avoid more danger, the other sage suggests they get out of the dark and head up to the cabin for safety. Agreeing with the idea, the vigilant just nods and follows the group up the mountain trail. A short time later, the group is properly settled inside the small, isolated residence on the peak. Seo serves hot tea and asks how the military exam went, also wondering how the young man found him there. The sage's companion comments that he was already expecting to see the boy there after hearing about his success in the earlier phases. Curious about the change, the scholar confesses he never imagined the young man would trade letters for weapons so suddenly. Drinking his tea calmly, Yi Sun-sin makes up that there's no special reason and that he only quit his studies due to a lack of talent. Seo doesn't buy the lie and states that if the warrior lacks talent, then no one else in the world has it. With a slight smile, our hero tells his partner to just see this sudden choice as a simple decree from the heavens. His friend bursts out laughing at once, complimenting that the young man's skill for making up stories is still razor sharp. The heavy atmosphere from before completely vanishes as the room fills with the sincere laughter of old companions. Watching this interaction from afar, Jimin reflects on how deep the friendship between these three really is. Cutting the jokes short, the sage asks for the real reason for his visit. The young man insists he only came to pay his respects. But the scholar stares at him intently, warning that his expression gives away that something urgent is weighing on his mind. Surrendering to his friend's intuition, the vigilantist smiles, admitting that he can fool even ghosts, but never him. With a nostalgic look, the warrior reveals that he carries a weight in his heart and needed to speak before he lost the chance. Sensing the dramatic tone of the conversation, Seo becomes extremely serious and asks what kind of secret this is. A good while later, now outside the cabin, the sage says goodbye, wishing them a safe descent down the dark mountain. Our hero thanks him for the hospitality and swears with all his conviction that his friend will pass the final exams with flying colors. The scholar returns the support and promises to deliver an answer to that delicate question very soon. Understanding, the young man tells his friend not to worry so much about it and finally turns to leave. The duo begins the long walk back down the dirt trail as the lit cabin fades behind them. In a memory of their conversation, our hero quotes an old saying, stating that if the king threatens his own country, he must be replaced. In the memory, the young master stares fixedly at the sage and asks if he can understand the depth of those words. The scholar deciphers the riddle instantly, confirming that absolutely everything can be replaced for the greater good, even the monarch. Even though he got the answer right, the sage becomes extremely tense just thinking about the consequences of such a rebellion. Confused, his friend asks why he's digging up this dangerous topic now and questions what the warrior's real opinion is. Back in the present, the scholar is still processing the shock of that absurd question that left him completely speechless. Alone in front of his house, Seo concludes that his partner was never one to say such reckless things and wonders what he's plotting. The man takes a deep breath, realizing that the simple nighttime visit carried a much heavier political intention. Far away, the two young men descend the mountain in total silence, surrounded only by the darkness of the large trees. Breaking the travel silence, the younger one looks at his partner in surprise and asks what his big dream in life is. Not expecting such a deep question out of nowhere, the vigilant asks back, wanting to understand the reason for his curiosity. The kid explains that his friend never spoke openly about the future, leaving everyone anxious about what he plans to become. In a bitter tone, Jimin laments that in an elitist country like this, an illegitimate son like him has no right to dream of anything. Sad about his reality, he confesses that his studies and training are worthless, leaving him only to accept the useless life he has. But our hero consoles him, saying that in a kingdom where even a bastard can become king, the boy has every right to reach the top too. Staring at the boy firmly, Yi Sun-sun warns that if he doesn't have a dream in life yet, he'd better find one as soon as possible. The vigilant guarantees he will make that wish come true, and swears it with all the conviction in the world. Time jumps to the 11th month of the year at the Joseon military camp, where heavy snow falls on the stone walls. On top of the wall, a soldier shivers from the cold, complaining that the freezing wind never stops and that the weather has turned into a real hell. Just then, a hooded colleague approaches in the middle of the blizzard, announcing that their patrol shift is finally over. Outside, two other guards, accompanied by a dog, grumble about having to go out in that absurd cold. Furious, the soldier curses the unfair world where some stay warm, while the rest freeze to their end in the middle of the snow. His partner tells him to keep it down before someone hears and pulls the dog's leash, calling it for their rounds. Agreeing with the idea, the gossiping official remembers they need to take a walk and check the part of the fence that fell. The duo then says goodbye to their colleagues at the post and starts walking through the soft snow, kicking up white powder. During the chilly walk, the younger one strikes up a conversation, asking if the sergeant shouldn't have gotten leave to visit his family today. Upset with the situation, the veteran explains that his time off was cancelled precisely because of the storm. Homesick, he laments that it's been about 3 months since he's seen his wife and youngest son because of military service. The conversation is interrupted when the younger soldier points ahead, saying they've reached the designated spot. Right ahead, the wreckage of the wooden barrier lies on the ground, covered by the thick mountain snow. The sergeant tells his partner to stay put while he approaches to check the barricade's debris. Out of nowhere, the guard dog starts barking desperately at a pile of snow on the ground. Startled by the commotion, the veteran tells the animal to shut up before it draws unwanted attention. The younger soldier complains from behind, saying there's nothing there and tells the dog to stop being so paranoid. Finding the situation bizarre, the young man even asks if the dog ate something bad to be freaking out like this. But the animal ignores the orders and continues to sniff the snow frantically, not stopping its barking for a second. Observing the spot closely, the sergeant finally notices something strange on the ground and wonders what the heck it is. In the blink of an eye, two men leap out from under the snow, sending white powder flying everywhere in a perfect ambush. Totally in shock, the veteran draws his sword from its sheath and bellows at the top of his lungs, warning of the surprise attack. He screams desperately to the camp, alerting them that the barbarians from the Hu tribe have breached the military perimeter. Before he can even finish his sentence, the enemy lands a brutal sword strike, slashing the sergeant's chest without mercy. Caught completely off guard, the younger soldier takes an arrow straight to the middle of his face, falling stiff in the snow. Taking advantage of the bloodbath, the invaders charge over the broken fence, crossing the border. One of the remaining guards runs desperately toward the base, telling them to warn the others about the enemy invasion. However, the poor guy doesn't even take 10 steps before several arrows lodge in his back, and he falls gone, in the middle of the path. High on the wall, the pair of guards watches the slaughter below, completely paralyzed by the sudden shock. A horde of barbarians charges forward, screaming that this massacre is revenge for burning their village and taking their families. Without wasting time, the soldier pulls the horn from his belt and blows with all his might to alert the rest of the military base. The deep sound of the horn echoes loudly, cutting through the camp's calm and alerting everyone to the enemy attack. Chaos erupts instantly, with dozens of armed soldiers running through the snowy corridors to defend the fort. The commander takes the front line, ordering the troops to fire and stop the invaders at any cost. Calling the enemy's persistent scoundrels, the leader draws his bow and fires along with the rest of the battalion. But the shower of arrows proves useless as the barbarians raise heavy shields, blocking all the shots with their barricade. Analyzing their tactic, the officer concludes they crossed the river at dawn and bathed in horse urine to fool the dogs' sense of smell. The firefight continues intensely, with the defenders shooting nonstop from the fort's wooden trenches. In the midst of the retaliation, an allied soldier takes an enemy shot directly to the helmet, falling wounded on the snowy ground. Desperate over the casualty, the commander yells for the troops to throw everything they have to hold back the bloody advance. Trying to stay calm, one of the guards assesses the situation and suggests there can't be more than half a dozen barbarians out there. Shaking with fear, his partner immediately disagrees, warning that the reality out there is very different from what he's thinking. Hearing his subordinate's terrified warning, the commander's eyes widen as a chill runs down his spine. The view on the horizon is terrifying, revealing a gigantic army of barbarian cavalry riding straight for the fort. The enemy leader raises his blade, demanding the end of every Joseon guard to avenge their tribe's blood 100 times over. With the numerical advantage, the invaders jump the trenches, massacring the defenders in a brutal exchange of blows. Bleeding, the commander tries to motivate his troops, promising promotions and great wealth to anyone who brings back a barbarian's head. But the motivational speech is short-lived, as a well-aimed arrow pierces the officer's shoulder before he can finish speaking. With the violent impact, the leader falls backward into the snow, leaving the troops completely desperate at their chief's fall. Suddenly, the guards stop fighting and look toward the horizon, confused, not understanding what the enemies are doing. On the other side of the fight, the invaders themselves stare into the distance, completely lost, with no idea what's going on. Furious with the pause, the sub-commander yells at the soldiers, wanting to know why they suddenly stopped shooting. Still looking at the open field, the soldier stammers that something very bizarre is happening out there. The official hears his subordinate's comment and turns to the front, wanting to understand what this nonsense is in the middle of a war. Far away, the crowd realizes that an arrow has crossed the entire battlefield and knocked one of the invaders off his horse. Alone in the white expanse, a mysterious archer on horseback draws his bow with impeccable form at the top of the hill. In a lethal shot, the arrow travels an absurd distance and hits another barbarian right between the eyes, knocking the guy off his horse. His allies fall. The barbarian chief is completely baffled as to how an attack could reach them from that distance. Observing the damage, the allied officer praises the lethal power of that weapon, stating that the archer's precision is simply surreal. Mounted on his horse with a bow in hand, the young Yi Sun-sin stares at the battlefield with unshakable confidence in his eyes. Gripping the reins firmly, the warrior charges through the soft snow, leading the assault against the horde of barbarian invaders. With morale high, the vigilante cracks a smile and orders the entire cavalry to follow him straight into the carnage. Answering their leader's call, a heavy Joseon squadron emerges at a gallop, kicking up a gigantic cloud of white dust. The soldiers at the fort breathe a sigh of relief upon recognizing the Allied uniforms and celebrate the arrival of reinforcements from the Y1 base. Not understanding the miracle, they question how their partners discovered the attack at the exact right time, but no one knows the answer. Furious with the interruption, the barbarian chief orders just one group to deal with the cavalry while the rest continue the main siege. Seething with rage, he orders his warriors to turn every enemy soldier who appears into a bloody meat sack without mercy. The inevitable confrontation happens in the middle of the white field as the two cavalries collide head-on in an absurdly violent clash. Right off the bat, Yi Sun-sin charges, slicing the first barbarian who tries to cross his path, sending blood flying everywhere. One of the enemies recognizes our hero and angrily asks if he was the rotten archer who took down 3 of their warriors just now. Raising a heavy club, the invader promises to make him pay for that humiliation in blood and charges the young warrior with everything he's got. Using his mount's momentum, the vigilante dodges the brutal attack effortlessly and immediately delivers a quick counter. Cut. With his sharp blade passing straight through, our hero finishes the lethal move, taking down another opponent in the freezing snow of the battle. At that, the invader's body plummets heavily from his mount and hits the snow-covered ground with a thud. Hearing the impact, the tribe's chief looks over his shoulder and is surprised to see his warrior taken down. Without giving a second's rest, the vigilante spins his sword in the air, clearing a path through the enemy cavalry. Facing the invaders with fury, the young man warns that by crossing the Joseon border, they've walked straight into the underworld. Pointing his blade firmly, the warrior guarantees that the barbarians' souls will be trapped there forever. Furious with the threat, the enemy leader charges on horseback, cursing our hero for talking so much nonsense in the middle of a war. The sound of steel echoes loudly across the white field as the two armies finally begin a brutal exchange. Maintaining control of his troops, Yi Sun-sin raises his sword and orders the soldiers to form a joint defensive line. Immediately, 3 allied guards position themselves side by side in the snow, ready to hold the charge. With that, the horde of barbarians speeds up their mounts, charging with everything they have to break Joseon's defensive formation. Leading the attack, the invaders advance, gritting their teeth, hoping to trample anyone in their path. But the young vigilant and the allied troops don't back down an inch and ride straight into the clash. At the moment of impact, one of the barbarians delivers a sideways cut, trying to take his opponent's head off with brute force. Using the momentum, our hero ducks, dodging the enemy's blade with an impressive reflex. Caught completely off guard by the dodge, the invader's eyes widen as he realizes he left his guard wide open. In a fraction of a second, Yi Sun-sin applies a precise cut, slashing through the air with lethal speed. The sharp blade hits the enemy's chest dead on, sending blood flying everywhere in the midst of the cavalry. With the violent impact, the barbarian completely loses his balance and plummets from his mount at once. Seeing his partner fall, another enemy warrior charges from behind, attempting a surprise attack with full force. However, the vigilant is much faster and anticipates the attack, turning his body to counter the blow. Taking the brutal counter-attack, the invader groans in pain as blood trickles from the fresh wound. Out of patience with the horseback fighting, the young master leaps off his horse, landing firmly on the frozen ground. As soon as he lands, our hero delivers an absurd flying kick straight to the enemy leader's chest, knocking him off his saddle. Rolling through the soft snow, the big guy groans dazed, trying to process the weight of that sudden blow. But the man refuses to give up and grips the hilt of his own sword with desperate force. Shaking with rage, the tribe's chief gets up, yelling that the rotten kick almost shattered his bones. With a grim face, the brute fixes his gaze on the boy, realizing he's not just any soldier. On the other side, the Joseon warrior maintains an impeccable posture and holds his weapons, exuding a frightening calm. Admitting the kid's talent, the invader confesses he never imagined running into such a good fighter in that camp. Right after, the barbarian plants his feet, crushing the snow, and prepares to return the favor. Charging with blood in his eyes, the chief promises to knock out all the vigilante's teeth without mercy. Delivering a cross cut, the cocky man swears he'll make a necklace out of the boy's teeth to wear around his neck. Reading the move with ease, our hero slides his feet in the snow and escapes the charge at the very last millisecond. Seizing the huge opening, the young man dashes past the enemy's back with a swift and fatal cut. With surreal agility, the warrior finishes the move, landing softly on the white ground. Very serene, he turns his head just enough to check the damage he just caused. Before the barbarian can fall, the vigilante spins his body and drives a punch deep into the big guy's ribs. Giving no chance for defense, the boy follows up with a brutal elbow strike straight to the enemy leader's face. The impact is so strong that the invader blacks out for a moment and collapses face first onto the frozen earth. Kneeling and defeated, the man gasps for air while vomiting a pool of dark blood onto the ground. Before he can try to get up, the warrior's cold blade stops exactly at the barbarian's neck. Imposing, the hero of Joseon looks down, staring at the human trash he just humiliated in the fight. In a threatening tone, Yi Sun-sin announces that all of his subordinates have either perished or surrendered for good. Cornered, the tribe's leader's eyes widen in a cold sweat as he realizes the entire plan has gone down the drain. Around them, the devastated scene shows only the blood-soaked bodies of the invaders scattered across the frozen field. A short time later, allied soldiers round up the surviving barbarians and force them all to kneel in the snow. Calm returns to the region as the sun rises, illuminating the white-covered landscape. In the middle of the silent forest, a small rabbit rests peacefully, oblivious to all the slaughter that happened nearby. Suddenly, the sharp whiz of an arrow rips through the air, flying at an incredible speed between the trees. The shot just misses, sticking deep into the ground and scaring the rabbit, which flees desperately in a single leap. Frustrated with his bad aim, Jimin stomps through the snow, cursing his own lack of skill. With a scowl, the kid grumbles to himself that the northern hares are much faster than he imagined. The boy lets out a tired sigh, forming steam in the cold, and fixes his hair, already out of patience with the hunt. Staring at the empty woods, he wonders how many animals they've let escape and hears a suspicious noise in the bushes. Curious about the rustling leaves, the hunter quickly turns his head, trying to identify the source of the sound. The landscape remains still, with the large dark trees contrasting against the completely white winter ground. In a flash, his partner's eyes light up with excitement as he finally spots a decent target in front of him. Walking slowly through the grass, a huge wild boar appears, grazing distractedly in the forest. Excited by his great luck, the kid whispers in shock, seeing a guaranteed dinner wandering around so carelessly. Drooling with anticipation, he licks his lips, imagining the roasted meat and wonders how they got so lucky on their outing. Without making a sound, the young man adjusts his posture, stepping lightly on the snow so as not to scare away the big prize. Hidden behind a thick trunk, the young man slowly raises his bow and focuses his sight on the distracted prey. With great caution, the boy slides his hand into his quiver and pulls out one of the heavy arrows, feeling the iron tip. Drawing the string to its limit, he tenses his arm muscles, aiming perfectly at the animal's body. The hunter holds his breath, keeping his lethal gaze focused only on the exact moment to release the shot. A quick memory invades his mind with a wise voice explaining the famous spin shot technique. In the memory, the archer draws the string to its maximum, revealing that the secret is to twist the wrist at the moment of release. The instructor praises that the movement increases accuracy, but warns that rookie archers might end up missing the target. Back in the cold reality, Jimin puts the theory into practice and twists his wrist, locking the string at its limit. Calculating the distance between the tree and the lone boar, he waits for the perfect moment to take the animal down. But luck isn't on his side, and the animal suddenly perks up its ears, sensing the danger lurking in the woods. Seeing he was about to lose his chance, the boy releases the string at once, sending the spinning arrow with all his might. Startled by the noise, the boar takes off in a desperate run, leaving the shot to sink uselessly into the dirt. Immediately a second, much faster projectile cuts through the wind with a deafening whiz. Before the animal can disappear, the new arrow hits its side dead on, splashing blood onto the snow instantly. Maintaining total focus, the boy prepares another arrow to finish the hunt for good. Releasing the string with full force, the archer fires the projectile, which cuts through the snowy forest quickly. With a sharp thud, the attack hits the target directly, kicking up snow and dust on impact. Getting a huge scare, the enormous wild boar lets out a squeal of pain at that moment. Without a second thought, the wounded animal bolts in a frantic escape through the white snow. Utterly frustrated, the kid yells in anger, watching his dinner escape like that. Desperate not to lose his prey, he draws the bow to its limit again in a sheer rush. In an abrupt movement, the young man releases the tension and sends another arrow shot ripping through the cold wind. Out of nowhere, a well-aimed kick hits the hunter's leg, telling him to stop messing around. Taking the hit by surprise, the poor guy tumbles backward and scrapes his entire body on the white dust. Far from the forest, Josian soldiers guard the captured barbarians, who are surrendered in the ice. Staring at the ground, the invader leader wonders in shock how his warriors lost so easily. Imposing with his sword in hand, Yi Sun-sin observes the prisoners with brutal seriousness. Unable to accept the beatdown, the enemy chief demands to know which formidable general stands before him. Answering bluntly, our hero throws it in their faces that they lost because they attacked in sheer desperation. Giving a moral lesson, he assesses that the reason for Josian's overwhelming victory is obvious. The warrior guarantees that his troops simply trained tactics designed specifically to crush raiders. Even hearing all that, the stubborn brute grumbles that this excuse is still hard to swallow. The prisoner swears that his tribe's warriors had never lost a single fight to that army. At that, the big guy ends up admitting that their invincibility lasted until they ran into a monster like him. Cutting the small talk, the vigilant orders the troops to take the surrendered men straight to the base. Without questioning the order, the subordinates salute, ready to begin the heavy escort. The scene cuts to the regional government office, where a shout of shock echoes through the main hall. Magistrate questions, stunned, if the famous rookie officer really led the defense at dawn. Respectfully, the official, bowed in the middle of the hall, assures him that the military report is 100% real. The advisor recalls that last autumn, local soldiers invaded barbarian lands and caused destruction. He deduces that the band of 30 men crossed the frozen river only to seek revenge for their burned village. Agreeing with the theory, one of the officers points out that the Allied fort on the border was on the verge of falling. The soldier reports that our hero arrived at the exact right moment with reinforcements and saved the entire Allied squadron. Assessing the whole chaotic situation, the head of the government falls into a tense silence, processing the news. Reading the official document, the soldier details that the victorious troop beheaded 6 invading bandits. He then reveals they captured 14 alive, but the nearly destroyed base suffered some fatal casualties and injuries. However, the official highlights that the young man's support battalion suffered only 3 minor scratches. Shocked by the confrontation's numbers, the magistrate is perplexed by that absurd difference in power. He questions, stunned, how the reinforcement squadron didn't have a single loss in the midst of all that carnage. The official confirms the miracle and showers him with praise, pointing out that the young man is a soldier of unquestionable bravery. The veteran remembers that since arriving at the tactical post, the boy has been sweeping the barbarians from the territory. Leading the conversation, the man points out that the rookie has annihilated anyone who dared to challenge the kingdom's peace lately. In a heavily critical tone, he throws it in their faces that the previous commanders were nothing but a bunch of wimps. Hearing the attentive analysis, the other counselors in the room silently agree with that undeniable fact. The evaluator states that our hero's brilliant maneuvers surpass any high-ranking officer who has ever set foot there. Bothered by the butt, kissing, his partner gives him a discreet elbow, interrupting the talkative man. Forcing a smile, the old man suggests sending the victory report to the capital as soon as possible. Killing the mood, the leader rejects the idea and tells the duo to scram after notifying the regional superiors. With little choice, the two officials bow politely, accepting their boss's command on the spot. Walking through the open courtyard, the pair of officials moves away from the main hall with very slow steps. The atmosphere between the two political partners grows a bit silent during the sunny walk back. Noticing the tension, the soldier scoffs, asking if the old man is feeling sick because of his sore face. Letting out a long, tired sigh, the old man laments that the good life of his family lineage has unfortunately come to an end. His partner keeps pace with the older man, paying close attention to that dark and mysterious comment. Completely confused, the official demands an urgent explanation about what the heck he means by that. With a serious expression, the counselor just tells the man to use his head and analyze the war scenario. The veteran explains that the invaded tribe won't let it slide and will retaliate with triple the force. He deduces that this intense war of revenge will become a constant nightmare at that point on the border. Agreeing with the tragic logic, the official assesses that the only way out is for one side to run from the fight. Explaining the rules, the old man states that soon the kingdom will send a colossal army to crush the enemies for good. Worried for his own skin, he knows that the entire Josian village will become a prime target in the middle of the retaliation. Finally getting it, the official understands the reason for all that dramatic talk about the rich family's future. Mocking his friend's slowness, the counselor lifts his face, confirming the theory with pure malice. Laughing at the misfortune, his partner confirms he perfectly understands the old man's financial drama. The man exposes that the old man's clan was very powerful before being exiled to that remote border. Without mincing words, the man reveals that the tycoon got filthy rich through illegal smuggling in the region. He assesses that a heavy war would block the trade routes, destroying the old man's entire criminal scheme at once. Exuding cynicism after his deduction, the soldier asks if he happened to drop any lies in the middle of that gossip. Exposed bluntly, the counselor swallows hard and falls into a deep silence, processing the insult. Realizing he went too far with the teasing, the talker starts to sweat, feeling the situation suddenly get tense. Trying to maintain his superior pose, the official slowly exhales to avoid causing a scene in the courtyard. With his back to the snooper, the old man picks up his pace, telling his colleague to shut up and change the subject. Suddenly, the official stops dead in his tracks on the dirt ground, halting his walk without any warning. Slowly, a very perverse and calculating expression takes over the corrupt old man's face. Very confident in his own cunning, he guarantees that there's always a way to profit more in the middle of a crisis. Far from the capital's political schemes, the icy wind continues to sweep across the great mountain dunes. The harsh winter punishes the Josian military base, built right next to the great frozen river in the valley. The soldiers patrol, walking with difficulty in the dense snow that has taken over the roads. Breaking the peace, the camp explodes in a shout of excitement, celebrating the troops' bloodbath against the enemies. Reading the official document, the commander praises the incredible work the warrior did on the border. He says he has already sent messages to the high command and that our hero will surely get a promotion and a good sum of money. Without making a big deal, Yi Sun-sun politely thanks his superior for his help. But the veteran quickly cuts him off and confesses that he's the one who should be thanking him for all this. With a lively laugh, the chief reveals that he ended up getting a nice bonus thanks to the rookie's absurd achievements. Maintaining his usual focused posture, the warrior listens to the chief's celebration in complete silence. Just then, the mood changes quickly when the old man grumbles that there's something very annoying ruining the party. Noticing the change in tone, our hero pays closer attention, waiting for the bad news to come. Spilling the beans, the chief says that the top brass is not happy at all with this crazy wave of military victories. Completely confused by this logic, the rookie tries to process why the big shots would hate victories. Showing the letter, the commander explains that the excessive use of military force could end up sparking a much worse war. Upon hearing that flimsy excuse, the warrior can't hide his indignation at the absurd order. Furious, the boy confesses he has no idea which crazy general came up with such a ridiculous rule. Faced with that clear frustration, the veteran just stares at the young man, knowing he's absolutely right. Without backing down, the warrior states that the big shots in the capital have completely misunderstood the situation on the border. He explains that the barbarians no longer respect the kingdom, crossing the river all the time to hunt and steal land with blatant disregard. Our hero recalls the bloodbath last autumn when these same invaders destroyed villages and took out the people without mercy. To retaliate, the Allied troops invaded their base, captured their leaders, and hung their heads to show who's in charge. Even with the brutal warning, the rookie points out that the bandits returned seeking revenge, and he was just doing his job by kicking out the scum. Trying to continue his argument, the boy raises his hand to expose another gigantic flaw in this logic. But the old man interrupts him at once, asking if the young man really thinks he doesn't know about all this carnage. Laying it on the line, the chief says the officials just don't want trouble on their watch, so it doesn't tarnish their own records. Blunt and direct, Yi Sun-sin warns that the wish of these cowardly politicians simply won't happen. Silence fills the room as the veteran is surprised by his subordinate's audacity. Analyzing the enemy, the warrior guarantees that the barbarians won't back down as long as the situation remains like this. Catching the dangerous idea in the air, the commander tensely questions if this means a new mass attack. Without a single second of hesitation, the young man just confirms the tragedy with great seriousness. He warns that the next attack is inevitable and will bring an army so huge it will make the previous invasion look like child's play. Sweating nervously at the revelation, the veteran demands to know where the heck the boy got such terrifying information. Our hero reveals that he got the truth straight from the barbarian prisoners who surrendered and sought refuge in the army. Skeptical of the source, the commander grumbles that you can't trust those people, since deep down, they're all treacherous barbarians. To debunk the argument, the young man reveals that the gossip matches perfectly with the reports from spies infiltrated in enemy territory. Realizing things are about to get real, the old man becomes apprehensive and asks when this gigantic war will break out on their doorstep. Explaining their tactics, the rookie deduces that the invasion will happen before winter ends, taking advantage of the frozen river to cross their troops. The base leader puts a hand to his chin and reflects tensely on the tight timeline they have to prepare. Having a brilliant idea, the old man points his finger, ordering the boy to go check out this bizarre movement with his own eyes. Surprised by the direct mission, the young man just stays calm and listens to the chief's instructions. The commander justifies that it would be crazy to send a desperate alert to the king based only on street rumors. He reinforces that a false alarm would cause a huge headache and would cost him his neck if there were no invasion. Understanding the annoying politics behind it, the warrior agrees and confesses that he was already planning to form a group to investigate the enemy location. Finding it great that the boy was already a step ahead, the chief tells him to pack his bags to leave tomorrow morning. Accepting the dangerous mission, the hero of Joseon gives a polite bow, ready to depart. As he was about to leave, the young man stops at the office door, creating suspense. Looking over his shoulder, he asks to make a demand that has been on his mind for a while. Curious about the sudden mystery, the old man gives the green light for his subordinate to lay his cards on the table without any fuss. Sending a very direct message, the boy demands that the chief start giving real orders instead of just suggesting what he should do. Leaving the veteran speechless, our hero says goodbye and firmly closes the wooden door behind him. Taking a puff from his pipe, the old man grumbles to himself that it's impossible to give orders when the kid has a presence that intimidates anyone. Letting out a long sigh, the veteran stares at the snowy window and laments his own lack of authority with his brilliant subordinate. The scene cuts to a chilly morning on the border, where soft snow covers the simple cabins of the military camp. The silence of winter dominates the entire frozen landscape around Yi Sun-sin's rustic lodging. Inside, the house servant wakes up early to tend the fire and ensure a hot lunch for her master. Tending to the pots on the wood stove, the young woman checks if the water has boiled, preparing the morning meal. But a noise in the street catches her attention, and she quickly goes to the front door to take a peek. As soon as she steps out into the cold, the maid greets the Joseon warrior who has just arrived with his mount after a long journey. Smelling something wonderful coming from the yard, the young master turns his head, sniffing the aroma in the air. Starving, he asks the girl what miracle that smell of roasted meat is in such an isolated place. Before she can answer, Jimin appears, running frantically through the main gate, yelling for his friend. Puffing out his chest with the utmost pride, the kid boasts that he finally managed to take down a huge boar in the woods. Lying through his teeth, the hunter makes up a heroic story, saying he took down the furious beast with a fatal arrow to the head. Hearing the nonsense, the servant laughs, revealing that the boy came back from the hunt all scratched up and bruised. Caught in the act, the cocky kid gets extremely embarrassed and tries to defend himself, asking where she got that absurd idea. To prove she's not crazy, the young woman points directly at the marks on the young man's neck, showing the clear damage. Annoyed by the exposure, he pushes her hand away and tries to fix his excuse, saying he only fell down the hill because the animal was very heavy. Appealing to the heavens in a dramatic tone, the kid swears that only he and the deceased animal know the true story of bravery. Thinking he's making an impression, the show off-points to the fire, confirming that the delicious dish didn't just appear out of nowhere. Thinking he's the greatest archer of all time, he boasts, asking his partner to admit that his aim is a truly rare talent. With his hands on his hips, the conceited guy laughs loudly, stating that he was born with a bow in his hand, knowing how to shoot like a master. Tired of all the whining, the servant turns her face away, bored, and tells the boy to stop embarrassing himself in the yard. Getting stressed again, he tries to use some crazy logic about fish knowing how to swim to prove that geniuses are born ready. But the crazy argument is cut short when they both notice that the warrior paid no attention to the hunting story. Seeing his friend's serious face, the archer lets out a confused grunt, not understanding the heavy mood that just appeared. Completely focused, the hero of Joseon ignores the nonsense, staring at his partner with a truly intimidating intensity. The shock silences them both as they stand in the yard, waiting for the bomb to drop at any moment. Maintaining absolute suspense, Yi Sunsen turns his back and orders his friend to come inside with him for a very serious talk. Inside the snow-isolated house, the mood between the two old friends in the office gets very serious. Sunsen sits at the table, facing his partner, and demands to know the real reason the boy insisted on coming along for the whole trip. With the utmost conviction, Jimin reveals right away that his big dream in life is to become a very successful merchant. He explains that to master trade, he'll need to learn the languages of other countries the hard way. With that, the boy argues that knowing a foreign language is the absolute secret to making a huge profit in negotiations. Assessing the hot air, our hero cuts the excitement short and questions how much his friend has actually studied from the books he lent him in the past. Breaking into a cold sweat, the apprentice lowers his head in shame and admits he only read the very beginning of one of the Chinese texts. Without cutting him any slack, the vigilante crosses his arms and tells the young man to recite the entire content from memory, with his back turned. Completely nervous from the sudden pressure, the boy tries to recite the introduction and soon starts stuttering, forgetting the story. The older one's patience runs out in an instant as he slams his open hand down on the table with considerable force. The sudden bang startles the kid, who flinches at once, fearing he's about to get a serious beatdown right there. Very disappointed with his companion's laziness, the warrior announces he has no choice but to apply a severe punishment on the spot. He firmly decrees that for the next 5 days, the young man will practice morning calligraphy while balancing on one leg. To make matters worse, the cruel exercise will last a solid 2 hours, following the exact training standard of the royal soldiers at the base. Not having any of the torture, Jimin grumbles that he's not a soldier and begs with his hands clasped for a much lighter punishment. Losing his patience for good, the officer tells his partner to pack his things and head back to his homeland tomorrow morning. Hearing the real threat of being kicked out of the camp, the kid's eyes widen, sensing the extreme danger of the situation. Knowing very well that his friend wasn't kidding, he swallows his tears and accepts the cruel punishment with his arms crossed. Adding even more terror to the sentence, the warrior warns that the training will be absurdly tough and that the house servant will be watching his every move. With no escape route from the strict punishment, the young apprentice lowers his head, letting out a long, defeated sigh. The next morning, the sun rises brightly, illuminating the isolated cabin and reflecting on the fresh snow scattered across the huge yard. The servant politely says goodbye to her master, wishing him a safe patrol as the officer rides his black horse far away. As soon as the big guy disappears down the white path, the young woman turns and goes back to her sweeping and heavy chores. In the middle of the empty lawn, Jimin trembles all over, trying to maintain his insane balance with 2 giant rocks tied to his suspended leg. Whimpering in physical pain from the effort, the clever one asks the girl if the strict boss has really taken off for good. Taking advantage of the quick confirmation, he kicks the ropes, releasing them and letting the blocks fall to the dirt ground at once. Greatly relieved by the stolen break, the hunter massages his knee, complaining of the immense pain spreading through his body. However, the happiness is short-lived as the government servant delivers a loud, violent blow with a stick right on the lazy one's back. Almost collapsing in the snow from the cowardly strike, the boy turns his head, fuming with rage for being attacked so treacherously. Holding the bamboo rod intimidatingly, the young woman says she received direct orders to let him have it if he slacked off for a second during training. Feeling no pity for the exhausted sufferer, she tells the slacker to focus on the clock and warns him of the obvious danger of skipping this daily practice. Annoyed by the relentless watch of the annoying babysitter, he turns his face away, grumbling that this ridiculous punishment teaches him absolutely nothing. Ignoring the boy's childish whining, the guard just brandishes her makeshift weapon, demanding he return to the painful posture at once. A brilliant evil idea forms in his mind, and the stressed-out boy cracks a vengeful smile, calculating a perfect way to get back at the girl in the future. Frightened by that bizarre maniacal expression, the maid backs away, crossing her arms and calling the guy crazy for laughing to himself in the woods. A few hours later, back at the lodging at night, Yi Sun-sin surprises the intern by assuring him he's arranged a very special outing for him. In the frightening, icy darkness, a small tactical squad advances in total silence, crossing the deadly plains under the full moon. Heavily bundled up, the soldiers step carefully on the deep snow to avoid leaving large tracks behind on the clear terrain. Keeping in an extremely tight formation, the tactical squad becomes a perfect ghost, swallowed by the shadows of the hostile environment northwest of the river. The icy territory hides terrible enemy traps beneath the dark undergrowth, devastated by the severe end of year weather. Crouched behind the frozen grass, the young commander studies the view with impressive care in the middle of the secret mission. Slowly raising his arm, he points to a cabin destroyed in the blizzard and confirms that the architectural junk is their spy's den. One of the patrollers asks about the number of allied agents inside, and the chief confesses that only one man lives there with his 2 little daughters in the chaos. Determined not to risk overall security, the leader recruits a single experienced soldier for the infiltration, ordering the others to maintain maximum focus on the rear. Sneaking through the infinite darkness, the infiltrating duo presses against the wall of the abandoned residence, praying their theory is true. Evading the small window's line of sight, the warrior drops to his knees near the door, making the least possible noise on the dirty wood. Without any warning, the inside of the house echoes with a poem disguised as a riddle, mentioning the empty nests that sneaky little birds leave behind. The rickety door opens, revealing the chubby silhouette of the bearded informant, exuding calm as he was already monitoring the perimeter. Skipping the formal pleasantries, the prodigy kid enters the modest room, firing off the big question about the enemy horde's movements. Already comfortable in the warmth of the glowing coals, the wrinkled-skinned man seals the worst-case scenario, guaranteeing the reality of the invasion in the north. Although not betting on the specific date of the genocide, the guy guesses that the barbarians will flood the region, breaking out in about 20 days. Very focused on the practical details of the tactic, Yi Sun-sin doesn't accept random bets and presses the spy to reveal where this exact timeline came from. Holding his steaming mug, the informant spills the story of a female slave owned by the great tribal lord as the source of the fatal leak. Adding more to the terrible account, the old man claims to have seen the enemy blacksmith sweating buckets to produce a river of blades and piercing points. The calculating war focus takes over the young vigilant as he impatiently questions the coordinates of the central fort and the available militia in the area. While refilling his distinguished guest's cup, the host points to the nearby mountain bases, describing a strategically camouflaged lair there. The natural geography turns the enemy village into the ultimate defensive terror, boasting gorges on one side and a hell of sharp stakes in the front. Laying out the math for a complete slaughter, the old man breaks down the number of houses, calculating a final team of 200 pure brutes for the sword fight. Taking a deep breath, feeling the weight of future terror, the expert reveals that this whole local threat would be small potatoes compared to the political monster summoned from deep within. A deathly silence reigns in the place as the man delivers the seal of demise, decreeing that the big boss has summoned the armies of a much greater demon from the continent. Stroking his chin thoughtfully, the young tactician absorbs the grim gossip, imagining that the sunny border would soon sink into a true red deluge. Shaking his head in blind acceptance of the cursed fate, the old man promises more than 1,000 crazy heads, splitting the mountain range in half, wanting pure national panic. Stunned by that terrifying scale of potential casualties, the officer blinks in disbelief, a single cold drop running down his trembling cheek. Intending to bury the boy's hopes for good, the informant warns that the number of condemned souls varies with the will of the enemy's master fortress. Sunk in the harsh reality of oppressive geopolitics, our hero shuts his mouth, swallowing a bitter pill to digest the idiotic bureaucracy that caused this colossal rift. Painting a hypothetical mural of blood, the spy bets his life that if the Great Lord pulls his entire maximum force, not a single stone will be left standing in that fragile dynasty of the complacent king. The old man begs for the decency of the royal bigwigs to inject urgent troops before everyone gets crushed, but the young man's mind only chases the cursed name of the culprit. Listening and running through the bizarre mental file, the bearded man vomits up the full name of the villain, exposing his affiliation with a powerful clan famous in the entire court. The exact second his brain processes the cursed words of the disgusting barbarian clan, a dangerous spark explodes directly in the reincarnated officer's shocked iris. Putting the political pieces perfectly in place, the informant lists the foreign fiefs and noble titles, confirming the big shot's rank in the filthy neighborhood. Freezing his body in a frantic spiral of thought, the knight processes the rod of ancient times, searching for the cursed traitor responsible for a third of the epic mess of the past. In the dark web of distant memory, the disgusting face of a warlord swearing false support emerges, humiliating common sense with phony peace speeches involving the nasty Japanese. Crashing into the harshness of the merciless present, Yi Sun-sen's eyes practically burn the old man as he begs for confirmation of the dirty name Nur Asi appearing in some filthy record.